My son invited me to a VIP party. I thought he wanted peace between us. But beside the pool, my daughter-in-law pulled me aside and whispered, "Stay away from my husband. He spent his whole life escaping the image of you, an old pool cleaner." I looked at the water behind her and replied, "I know." I'd watched him grow into that kind of man. Something hardened across her face. Then her hands hit my chest, and I was in the water. The fall itself wasn't what broke me. It was the sight of my son standing there taking it all in and walking away. Welcome to His Hidden Revenge, a place where the stories that quietly unfold behind closed doors finally get told. If this kind of storytelling speaks to you, stay close and follow along so you never miss what comes next. Here's a question to sit with as we begin. If someone you loved dismissed you for decades, would you eventually walk away? Or would you quietly build something they never saw coming? I'd love to hear where you stand in the comments. One note before we begin. Some elements of this story have been shaped for the purposes of audio storytelling, and any resemblance to specific real people or events is purely coincidental. What matters is the truth at the heart of it. Mr. Athlon, you're lucky it wasn't worse. The doctor said the marble edge could have split your skull open. Lucky. That's the word they use when your own son watches you sink and turns his back. Nathan's shoulders were what I saw first as I broke the surface, choking on chlorine and blood. He kept walking toward the VIP tent, didn't even hesitate. How long had I been under? Approximately 45 seconds before the lifeguard reached you. At 70, unable to lift your right arm, 45 seconds is an eternity. But to make sense of how I wound up at that party needed just enough to be presentable and just invisible enough not to be a liability. I have to go back 6 weeks. I was in my kitchen in Haddonfield, New Jersey, the coffee maker gurgling through its cycle. Small house, 2 bedrooms, vinyl siding that's been overdue for replacement. The phone lit up at 7:47 a.m. Dad. Nathan's voice carried a warmth that was obviously rehearsed, deployed like a tool. I know it's been a while, but I'd really like you to come to Palm Springs for this party. It's important to me. Nathan Athlon, 41 years old, vice president at Hargrove Peak Capital. My son, twice a year phone calls, Christmas cards with faces I barely place. What kind of party? A VIP event. We're closing a major deal, $250 million, for a luxury resort development. The company I've spent 3 years building toward Fontenot Hospitality. My grip on the phone went tight. Fontenot. Which resort? Palm Springs Desert Grand Resort. The big one. Mount San Jacinto views infinity pool. He paused. You'll love it, Dad. Everything contracted. Palm Springs Desert Grand Resort. I had memorized every tile in that pool, every inch of the infinity edge. I'd worked out the depth gradient myself back in 1990, when a flaw in the original design had created a dangerous undertow. I'd love to come. I'll finally get to see Eli. Of course, Portia will get you the flight details. And Dad, one thing. Maybe don't bring up the pool maintenance history with anyone there. These are high-level people. You understand how it is. Do you know what it does to a man hearing his son ask him to erase the labor that raised him? I understand, I said. After the call ended, I didn't move for 11 minutes, just stood there, Palm Springs Desert Grand Resort. He had no idea I'd logged 6 months of night shifts keeping that property's water systems from failing. No idea the infinity edge he boasted about had been calculated by my hands. And Fontenot Hospitality, the firm Nathan had spent 3 years chasing, I had to reach back to 1990 to explain what that name meant to me. Arizona. Heat so heavy, it turned the asphalt soft before noon. I was 39 running night maintenance across resort properties around Palm Springs. Nathan was 10 sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with me, the whole place permanently scented with chlorine. His mother had gone 2 years before, worn down by a husband with roughened hands and chemicals perpetually in his hair. Night shift paid 20% more. That 20% was the margin that kept Nathan in a school with art classes and a library that stayed open past 6. The call came at 1:47 a.m. on a Thursday. Gerald, we've got a disaster on our hands. The entire filtration system is down, and we have 300 VIPs coming at 6 p.m. for the grand opening gala. Let me see it. I pulled up at 2:15 a.m. The pool deck was a mess, water, gone cloudy pumps, dead every pressure gauge reading 0. At the center of it stood a young man in a suit worth more than my monthly rent, looking like he might fall apart. Remy Fontenot, 28 years old, with a French accent that lent weight to every syllable. This was his first venture on American soil, a partnership that couldn't survive a ruined opening night. If the gala collapsed, the investors would vanish. He stayed beside me for 4 solid hours. Never retreated inside, never got on the phone, just watched and asked questions. Why did the seal go? How do you decide which valve comes first? I pulled and replaced pump seals, brought the pressure systems back into calibration, checked pH levels on a 15-minute rotation. By 5:30 a.m., the water had gone clear. By 6, it shimmered like blue glass. The gala came off without a fault. 300 guests toasted with champagne at the edge of a pool that had been dead 6 hours earlier. Remy pressed $500 into my hand, a full week's pay. "You are saving my life tonight," he said. "What do they pay you for this? Is it enough? I'm just doing my job." "No, you are doing my job. I am the one who should have caught this before it became a crisis." I assumed that was that. Rich man expresses gratitude. Working man drives home. But the following morning, my supervisor phoned. "Fontenot wants a word with you." The call ran 7 minutes. "Gerald, I have not slept. I don't want to simply compensate you for last night. I want to offer you something that isn't cash. I don't follow. I'm building a hospitality company, Fontenot Hospitality. I understand what luxury means and what wealthy guests expect. But the mechanical reality, how a pool actually functions, how pressure systems degrade, how you construct something that doesn't break, that I don't know." He paused. "I want you as my founding partner." I was standing there in my blue work uniform, grease still packed under my nails, a phone pressed to my ear, a French accent offering me the word partner. That was the first time I heard those 2 words together, founding partner. 3 decades on my son Nathan would invest 3 years cultivating Fontenot Hospitality, never once suspecting he was trying to get through a door his own father had built. And just last night at the edge of the infinity pool, I'd helped engineer Nathan, watched his wife drive me into the water, and walk toward the VIP tent while I went under. But the humiliation didn't start poolside. It started at the airport 3 days earlier. 3 days before my daughter-in-law put me in that pool, I was at Newark Airport watching my son approach with a woman I'd only ever encountered in photographs. I knew the moment I saw them that I was going to be handled a complication to be managed. Gate 31, Terminal B. I'd come 90 minutes ahead, one small carry-on dressed in my pressed chinos and the gray sport coat I kept for weddings and funerals. Nathan reached me first, taller than my memory had him, suit precise enough to draw blood. Behind him, Portia Athlon moved through the terminal, in designer cashmere, the shade of old money, 36 years old, carrying the particular finish that comes from years spent sanding down your origins. I put out my hand. "Portia, it's wonderful to finally meet you in person." Her grip lasted exactly 1 second. Her gaze stayed on her phone. "Nathan, did you confirm the car pickup in Palm Springs?" "Yes." He turned to me, with an expression that might have read as a warmth under generous conditions. "Dad, you look good. Ready for Arizona." "I'm looking forward to it," I said. Portia put 10 feet between herself and me, Nathan drawn along behind her. She made no effort to speak quietly. No effort at all. "Remember what we talked about. Said clearly enough for the gate agent to register. Clearly enough for the family with 3 children nearby. Clearly enough for me. Nothing about the difficult years the pool worked the overnight shifts raising him by himself. Those people won't connect with any of that." Nathan turned back in my direction. Our eyes met. He broke contact first. "I know," he said to her. "He won't. I need you to make certain your standing is at stake this weekend." I stood holding my boarding pass while something tore open quietly beneath my sternum. It wasn't the words I'd absorbed harsher. It was Nathan's silence. He didn't push back. Didn't say, "That's my father you're discussing." He accepted it the way a man nods while being briefed about mishandled cargo. Then I heard it from somewhere behind me, a voice pitched high with total certainty. Grandpa Eli Athlon, 8 years old, came tearing across the terminal and threw himself into me with every pound he had. The way children do before they've been taught that affection is a thing. You ration. The force of it bruised my ribs. I didn't care one bit. "You're really coming," he said, face buried in my shoulder. "Mom thought maybe you wouldn't make it." "Of course I'm here," I said. "I gave you my word, didn't I?" Portia's jaw tightened like a closed hand. "Eli, don't crumple Grandpa's jacket." "Come here." But Eli held fast for another 5 seconds. In those 5 seconds, I watched Nathan's face move through something I couldn't fully name. Just briefly, I believe he was somewhere else, somewhere he was 10 years old and sprinting toward me outside school, arms out piling into my work truck that always carried the smell of chlorine. What does it tell you when the only person in your family willing to embrace you without embarrassment is your 8-year-old grandson? The flight ran 5 hours. Nathan and Portia were in first class. Eli rode with me in row 19 middle and window seats, and we covered 4th grade his science project, and whether I thought the oceans would be explored in his lifetime. Then somewhere over New Mexico, he tilted his face up toward mine, the particular gravity kids take on when they've been sitting on a question. "Did you really use to fix pools?" I told him. "Water systems, filtration, the whole operation." He let a beat pass. "That sounds cool," he said, voice dropping. "Mom says it isn't, but I think it is." I set my hand on his shoulder. "Your mom is trying to build something good for you. That's what it is." He sat with that for a moment. "She says not to bring it up with you, but I want to know." So I told him not the whole story, just enough. How pool systems actually function, why pH balance is the thing you never ignore, how I could diagnose a failing pump just from the sound it made. He took it in the way you'd receive information about something rare. We touched down at Palm Springs International Airport at 4:32 p.m. The car service headed north toward Palm Springs as the desert sky lit up behind Mount San Jacinto in oranges and reds that belonged to no other place on the planet. Eli pressed his nose against the window glass. Portia scrolled her phone. Nathan ran calls about tomorrow's event. And then the car pulled up to Palm Springs Desert Grand Resort, and I stopped in the lobby doorway. That marble floor I'd mopped it at 3 a.m. for 2 years knew every vein and seam in the stone. The teak reception desk I'd helped set it in, 1991, holding a level steady, while the carpenter made his cuts. The fragrance of desert sage coming in off the courtyard. I'd designed the drainage there myself, so the monsoon rains wouldn't turn the walking paths into rivers. Nathan crossed to the desk, as if the building belonged to him. Reservation, under Athlon, the premium suite. The concierge offered a polished smile. "Welcome back to Palm Springs Desert Grand Resort, Mr. Athlon. Welcome back." If only he understood what that phrase meant to me. I ran my fingertips along the cool surface of the marble pillar near the entrance. Muscle memory from 1,000 overnight shifts. My hands recalled that stone more clearly than they remembered certain people's faces. There I was, standing in a lobby I'd built with my own hands, watching my son sign papers at a desk I'd helped install, a ghost drifting through his own history. Then I felt the weight of someone's attention settling on me. I looked across the lobby toward the bar. A man in a dark suit, early 50s, poised with the particular stillness that comes from private security work. Not a resort employee, not a guest. Watching me with measured, deliberate focus. Our eyes connected. He gave a single nod. Not a greeting, a confirmation. Recognition. Boyd Stanton. I only learned later he was head of property security, a man who'd been given my photograph years before, with one standing instruction: if Gerald Athlon walks into one of our properties, you call me first. But in that moment, I simply understood that Remy knew I was here. Someone had been stationed to keep watch to see that I was protected. The man held my gaze for exactly 3 seconds, then turned back toward the bar. He wasn't concealing himself. He wanted me to know I was being seen. 30 years ago, Remy Fontenot told me he'd remember what I'd done for him. I just hadn't understood he'd been honoring that promise every single day since. But that revelation came later. First there was the morning before the party and a phone call I was never meant to hear. That night I slept knowing someone was keeping watch on those hallways. The following morning brought a different kind of surveillance, the kind that operates when the people closest to you need you to vanish. Have you ever discovered you weren't merely unwanted, that you were a genuine threat, something to be contained to the people who needed you? Gone 6 a.m., the resort sat in early desert quiet. Mount San Jacinto flushed pink and gold in the sunrise light, the colors already burning at the edges before they'd fade by 9. I've been an early riser my whole adult life. 30 years of morning shifts carves that into you. I pulled on khakis and a linen shirt and went down toward the lobby for coffee. Nathan and Portia's suite sat 3 doors from mine. Passing it, I caught Portia's voice bleeding through the gap in the door. It was barely open, held ajar by the security latch. I should have kept moving. Should have kept my eyes forward. But then I heard the name. Mom, hold on. Let me get the door. No, Nathan's in the shower. I stopped only a moment, just long enough. The voice coming through the speakerphone was older, sharper edged with the desperation of someone capable of ugly choices. Portia, listen to me. Dolores Hendricks, 58 years old. Portia's mother, a woman I'd never laid eyes on, but one who was about to show me the exact shape of the pressure my son had been living under. If Nathan closes this deal, it wipes out everything we owe, every last bit of it. Do you understand what I'm saying? I know, Mom. That's why nothing can go sideways this weekend. Just keep that old man tucked in a corner somewhere. The VIPs don't need to cross paths with him. Nathan told you what happens if this closes the commission, the bonus structure, 200,000 plus equity participation. Portia's voice was flat and precise. But only if Fontenot signs and they're particular about who they choose to work with. Then make sure Gerald stays out of sight. Put him with the child. Keep him away from anyone who counts. Our debts, not her debts. Dolores wasn't simply being a snob about her daughter having married above her station. She was underwater, and she saw Nathan as the arm reaching down to haul her up from a depth that was already past her head. Standing in that hallway, I assembled the picture, feeling every bit the fool listening to people discuss me as though I were furniture. Except they weren't strangers. They were family. The weight on Nathan wasn't only ambition. It was the pressure of survival. Portia's survival. Dolores' survival. Whatever tangle of debt they had constructed that my son was now expected to unknot with one signature on one transaction. And I wasn't merely an embarrassment to manage. I was a live threat to their financial rescue. At what point does a father stop being a person and become an obstacle? A liability, a problem that needs containing. The door handle began to turn. I moved away quickly, feet silent on the carpeted corridor. By the time Portia stepped out to close the door properly, I was already around the corner, heart punching in my chest. As though I'd been caught doing something wrong, I skipped the coffee, went back to my room. Sat at the foot of the bed for 40 minutes, trying to decide what to do with what I'd heard. Nothing. That was the answer. Nothing. Not yet. 2 hours later, I found Eli. The resort had 2 pools, the infinity pool on the rooftop, where the following day's VIP event would take place, and a smaller, quieter one on the lower deck, wrapped in desert palms and red rock plantings. I found my grandson there at 8:30 a.m., working his way up and down the shallow end, drilling his stroke with that particular determined inefficiency children bring to everything. I settled at the pool's edge, khakis rolled up feet dangling in the cool water. The morning sun had started warming the desert air, and the scent of creosote and sage was drifting in from the landscape beyond. This was the Arizona I'd carried in my memory, spare, honest, unembellished. Eli spotted me and came over, small arms churning through the water. "Grandpa, you found me? Does your mom know you're out here alone?" She said I could swim before the party things start. She's getting herself ready. He caught the pool edge beside my feet. Water ran from his hair and darkened the concrete below. "Want to watch me do a handstand?" I watched him tip over beneath the surface leg, swaying above it for 3 seconds, before he burst back up with a grin spread across his face. "Perfect form," I said. He treaded water briefly, and then his expression shifted into that particular gravity children take on when they've been carrying a question. "Grandpa, did you really work at pools like this one?" I did, Eli. "Quite a few of them. Kept the systems going, cleaned them, made sure they ran right." He fell quiet, chewing on that. Then pitched so low, I nearly missed it. "Mom said, she said it was embarrassing." Is it embarrassing? That question landed harder than Portia's hands would land the next day. An 8-year-old ought not to need permission to love his grandfather. But there was Eli suspended in the water, waiting to find out whether his affection had been sanctioned. How long had Portia been planting this? How many quiet conversations had accumulated, slowly reshaping how he saw me, not with outright lies? I had worked at pools, yes, but she was weaving shame into that fact alongside it, teaching him that certain kinds of work diminish a person, that rough hands are a sign you're not worth knowing. I looked at my grandson, water still running from his hair, an 8-year-old's confusion working across his face, as he tried to reconcile the grandfather he loved with the embarrassment his mother had told him he was supposed to feel. "Some people see it that way, Eli," I said gently. "I think it's just honest work. Somebody has to do it." He turned that over in his mind. "I think it sounds cool. I'd really like to know how pools work. Maybe one day I'll show you." That wide, unguarded smile spread across his face, and he pushed off back toward his laps. I sat there watching him, feet still in the water I'd once serviced for $12 an hour, and I understood this child still knows what is real. He hasn't been talked out of it yet, the idea that work carries dignity, that a person's worth isn't measured by appearances. But Nathan and Portia are working to take that from him. Every studied word, every quiet instruction, every time they steer him away from me, they're teaching him that love belongs in a ledger, that it should come with terms attached. I have to make sure he still knows what's real when he grows up, whatever this weekend brings. But the weekend was only getting started, and the VIP lunch was about to show me exactly how much contempt can be poured into a wine glass and a smile. The VIP lunch opened at 1 p.m. on the rooftop terrace, white linen crystal stemware catching the Arizona sun. There's a particular kind of invisibility that settles over you with age and assumed poverty. People don't merely overlook you, they speak around you in languages they're certain you'll never follow. The terrace sat one level below the infinity pool, with Mount San Jacinto filling the western horizon like something off a postcard. Soft acoustic guitar played from hidden speakers. Nathan and Portia moved through the table with polished ease, investors' hotel group, representatives, financial analysts. Everyone present either had money or a direct line to it. I was placed at the far end. A server materialized with an expensive Pinot Noir I hadn't ordered, filled my glass without a word, and vanished. I was decor an elderly relative to be graciously accommodated and quietly sidelined. Alec Wentworth, a business associate in his early 60s with silver hair and a Brioni tie, leaned toward Nathan. "Your track record with resort acquisitions is impressive. 3 successful deals in 18 months. The key is relationships." Nathan replied, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone who's rehearsed this line until it sounds natural. "You can't force these things. You have to build trust over time." Trust. The irony of that word sitting in his mouth. The conversation found its way to European markets. Alec had done time in Paris, still kept connections there. He turned toward Portia and shifted into French. "Your perspective on the Riviera market is excellent. Where did you study?" Portia's face brightened. She glanced at me, a quick calibration to confirm I was safely monolingual, then answered in fluid Parisian French. "NYU, but I spent my summers in Nice." She lowered her voice slightly, but not quite enough. "My father-in-law doesn't understand a simple man." I sipped my Pinot Noir slowly, showed nothing, let the wine sit on my tongue while memory came flooding back. Marseille, 1986 to 1990. 4 years living in France while Rémy Fontenot was assembling his first European ventures and needed someone who understood American construction standards and could learn the French hospitality business from the inside. I'd kept a small apartment in the Port District, studied French at night school, worked resort properties during the day. By 1988, I was fluent enough to negotiate with contractors in the local dialect. 4 years in Marseille, madame. I understand perfectly. But I said nothing, just observed Portia's animated gestures, Nathan's proud smile at his sophisticated wife, neither of them knowing I'd caught every dismissive syllable. Invisibility is a peculiar kind of leverage. You hear everything, see everything, while the people around you perform their elaborate theater under the assumption the audience left. The lunch ran on. Market projections, leverage ratios, the timeline for the Palm Springs closing. I ate my salmon, drank my wine, and existed as furniture. When the plates were cleared and the crowd drifted toward the bar, I slipped away toward the restroom. Nobody registered my exit. The hallway was glass-walled, the desert stretching wide beyond it toward the southern ranges. Ahead of me, Nathan was pacing phone to his ear, deploying his corporate register, clipped, assured, commanding. I pulled my pace back and held position. He was too absorbed in the call to register me standing 20 feet behind him. "Preston, I need you to trust me on this. The relationship is solid, Preston." Preston Galt, his CEO at Hargrove Peak Capital. A man whose firm had built its name on thorough due diligence and careful deal-making. 55 years old, famously resistant to any acquisition his VPs couldn't back with hard numbers. I stopped where I was and stayed in the shadow of a decorative column. Nathan's voice carried easily in the empty corridor. I've been building this Fontenot relationship personally for 3 years, Preston. It's solid. This isn't some cold introduction. I've put real time into this. 3 years building it personally. My chest went tight. Remy trusts me, Nathan went on. This deal is mine. I own this relationship. I stood there invisible 20 paces behind my son and felt something give way inside my ribs that had nothing to do with my age and everything to do with recognition. He owns it. My son believes he holds a relationship I've maintained for 3 decades. Remy phones me once a month, has done since 1990. We talk about his grandchildren, my grandson the arc of business and life. Last month he asked whether I'd come to his daughter's wedding in Lyon next spring. The month before he'd sent a bottle of Chateau Neuf du Pape from a vineyard we'd visited together in 1988. And Nathan, my son, standing in a glass corridor of a resort I'd helped construct, wearing a suit worth more than my monthly mortgage, was informing his CEO that he had personally cultivated this connection, that he'd built it from the ground up, that he owns it. My son had spent 3 years courting the company I co-founded. He had no idea the door he was knocking on had my name carved into the deed. Trust me, Preston, Nathan said, drawing the call to a close. This is what I do. I'll reach you after the party tonight. He pocketed his phone, adjusted his tie, and moved toward the bar with the bearing of a man who is fully committed to his own legend. I stood in the hallway after he'd gone, afternoon sun warming the glass at my side, the taste of expensive wine still on my tongue. He had deceived his boss about the most significant thing in his professional life. Not a small distortion, not a stretch, a foundational lie, the kind that unravels careers when it surfaces. Nathan told Preston Galt, a man whose entire reputation rested on verification and trust, that the Fontenot relationship was his personal achievement. 3 years of cultivation, a connection he had built and owned. But that relationship was mine. Had been mine since 1990, since the night I repaired a broken pool system, and a young Frenchman offered me a partnership in place of payment. And Nathan had no idea. God help me. My son had no idea he was selling a house his father built. He didn't know because he'd never thought to ask, never paused to wonder whether the old man in the khakis and the awkward blazer might carry a history that ran deeper than pool chemicals and night shifts. He'd made the same assumption Portia had made about the French, the same assumption they'd all made, that I was simple and visible beside the point. I walked to the restroom, ran cold water over my hands, and studied my 70-year-old face in the mirror. The man looking back was holding secrets they couldn't have imagined, but I wasn't the only one keeping secrets that weekend. I didn't learn about the iPad recording until Audrey retrieved it during evidence gathering, but it had captured everything that afternoon while I was down at the lower pool trying to process what I'd overheard. Children absorb everything adults believe is private. And in the era of iPads and iCloud, they record it too, usually without any intention of doing so. Eli was in his bedroom, in the family suite, iPad propped on the desk at 4:30 p.m. Video calling Owen Beckett, his closest friend back in New York, another 8-year-old with gap-toothed enthusiasm and firm opinions about video games. The call was ordinary guileless, the kind of drifting conversation children fall into when they're at ease saying nothing of consequence while saying everything that matters. "Did you finish the volcano model?" Owen asked, his pixelated face filling Eli's screen. "Mr. Peters says it's due Tuesday." "Not yet," Eli said. "I'm in Arizona with my parents and Grandpa. I'll get it done when I'm back." "Cool. Is it hot there? It's raining here. It's nice." "We went swimming this morning. They covered the science fair Owen's new game, whether their teacher would pile on homework over Thanksgiving. The ordinary preoccupations of 8-year-olds the world before, it acquires its complications. But the suite walls were thin, luxury finishes, premium materials, not soundproof. And in the living room, 20 feet away, Nathan and Portia were having a conversation they believed was entirely private. Eli heard his father's voice, first muffled through the partition, initially just background noise, then growing louder. "Just need to get through tonight," Portia's voice sharper. "Your father." Audrey showed me the video file months afterward. On the screen you can watch Eli's face shift mid-sentence, his focus splintering as his parents' voices came through the wall. He kept talking to Owen, but something in him had already turned toward the wrong conversation. There's a specific kind of heartbreak in watching a child's face change, in the instant they understand their parents aren't who they thought they were. I saw it on a recorded video 6 weeks after the moment itself, and it hurt no less for the remove. You can see the precise instant on Eli's face, the confusion, the sting, the too early knowledge that family is not a simple thing. Eli. Owen's voice came through the iPad speaker. You okay, dude? Eli blinked and pulled himself back. Yeah, just nothing. My parents are talking about the party tonight. Does the hotel have a cool pool? I bet Arizona pools are awesome. Yeah, Eli said quietly. It's pretty cool. He was 8 years old and already learning to carry family secrets. Already grasping that certain things you overhear aren't meant to travel any further. Already acquiring the careful remove that develops in children who love people that say cruel things when they believe no one's listening. The conversation ran another minute. Owen talked about his weekend. Eli answered in single words, his attention somewhere else processing. Then Eli said, I gotta go, Owen. I'll text you later. Okay, have fun. Don't let your parents be boring. Eli tapped the red button. The video call ended, but the iPad stayed on the desk. Screen fading towards sleep mode. The small green light beside the camera still holding. The video call app, one of those services parents favor for keeping tabs on their kids' online interactions, had auto record switched on. Standard feature. Every call automatically saved, automatically pushed to cloud storage for parental review. And the microphone stayed live for 30 seconds after the call dropped to catch any final words, any technical hiccups, any conversation that lingered. 30 seconds. Nathan's voice came through the wall, crisp as a studio take. Once this deal closes, we won't need to deal with him anymore. Portia, thank God. I can't take another weekend like this. Just get through tonight. Tomorrow he flies home, and we don't have to see him until Christmas. Maybe not even then. The iPad captured every word. Time-stamped, authenticated, permanent. The most damning evidence rarely turns up in safes or hidden files. It gets captured on an 8-year-old's iPad during a video call about a science project. Eli left the bedroom to go swimming. Had no idea the iPad was still recording. Had no idea the file was being processed, compressed, staged for upload. The device sat on the desk screen, dark, the small notification light pulsing once every few seconds. At 11:47 p.m. that night, while the VIP party was still running on the rooftop, while I was being introduced to people who had no interest in meeting me, while Nathan was working the room, and Portia was performing, Eli's iPad completed its automatic backup. The file uploaded to iCloud, 47 megabytes, 22 minutes of footage. Video of Eli and Owen discussing volcanoes and video games. Audio of Nathan and Portia discussing how Gerald only matters if he signs something and how they won't need to deal with him anymore. The file was tagged with full metadata, date, time, location coordinates, device, ID. Everything a forensic analyst would require to put it before a court. Nathan and Portia had no idea. Eli had no idea. But 6 weeks later, when Audrey Crane subpoenaed my grandson's iCloud account as part of evidence gathering, after I'd brought her on, after I'd laid out everything, after she'd begun constructing the case, I didn't yet know that file would be Exhibit 2 in the boardroom presentation Audrey was already assembling. The only audio record of what my son truly thought of me. Not inference, not hearsay. His voice, his words time-stamped and authenticated and admissible. Dad only matters if he signs something. 22 minutes of documentation that my son regarded me as a conditional asset, a problem to administer, an embarrassment to contain. But that was weeks away still. That night, there was a party, and I walked onto a rooftop I had built 30 years ago, surrounded by people who had no idea who I was about to discover exactly how far my son would go to keep it that way. There's something disorienting about stepping into a party at a place you constructed with your own hands, while the room treats you as just another face who doesn't belong. The terrace opened out before me at the top of the stairs. Mount San Jacinto cut a silhouette against a pink-orange sky that only Arizona produces. The infinity pool shimmered turquoise beneath the surface lights, music drifting softly from speakers I'd helped mount in 1991. VIP guests in cocktail attire were beginning to filter in. The desert air cooling as evening settled, the smell of sage threading through chlorine and costly perfume. I paused at the top of the stairs, took it all in. 30 years. 30 years since I'd last stood up here. A waiter in a pressed white jacket moved past with a tray of champagne flutes. Champagne, sir. No, thank you, I said. Just water. He moved on without really registering me. I walked at an easy pace toward the infinity pool's edge. My eyes moved across every detail the way you read something you wrote yourself. This infinity edge I had redesigned it in 1990, corrected the undertow flaw the original engineers had overlooked. I'd sketched the fix on a napkin at 3 a.m. and put it in front of the contractor at 6 a.m. The beige marble coping I'd sourced that stone from a quarry in Idlewild. Selected it specifically because it held cool under direct sunlight and wouldn't scorch bare feet at noon in July. The filtration system humming beneath the deck, my installation, my maintenance schedule, 3 years of it. I could still pick out the faint whine in the secondary pump that told me the bearing would need swapping in another 6 months. This wasn't just a pool. It was my work written in tile and water and stone. And nobody here knew my name. I was a ghost walking through my own construction, invisible at a party thrown on top of labor. My hands had completed plans. My mind had drawn effort, my body had poured into this ground. Nathan moved through the crowd, in an expensive suit, hand on shoulders, easy laughter with investors and hotel representatives. Portia was in a black designer dress and heels, phone in hand, steering Nathan toward key contacts with practiced precision. They were a performance-polished magnetic, the kind of people who appear to bend rooms toward themselves. I stood near the far edge of the pool alone. VIP guests moved past without a glance. I was background furniture to their elaborate production. The Palm Springs acquisition is exactly the kind of strategic play we've been positioning for, Nathan told a cluster of investors. Portia produced that bright, cultivated laugh. Nathan has such vision. He spots opportunities that other people walk right past. Alec Wentworth, the man from lunch with the Paris connections, raised his glass. Your track record speaks for itself, Nathan. I stood there with my water glass, watching my son collect credit for building a relationship with a company I'd co-founded at a resort I'd maintained beside a pool I'd designed. Then Portia drifted to the infinity edge and positioned herself with the mountain view. Behind her phone, raised that wide smile, switched on. Hey everyone, her voice carried across the terrace. Live from the most incredible VIP party in Palm Springs. She was streaming. I could make out the phone screen reflected in the pool surface below her. Her face. The viewer count climbing 1,200, 1,800, 2,400. You guys, this view is insane. Mount San Jacinto at sunset. This is why Palm Springs is the next big luxury market. She swept the camera across the terrace, the party, the people, the carefully arranged perfection. Nathan and I are so honored to be part of this incredible deal. This is what hard work looks like. The count hit 3,000. Let me show you this infinity pool. It's literally perfect. She turned to film the water. I was crossing toward the buffet in the background of her shot, just moving through her frame. Her eyes flicked to the phone screen, caught me. Her smile went tight for a fraction of a second, fast enough that her live audience likely missed it, but I didn't. The irritation, the calculation. Anyway, this party is just... Oh, excuse me 1 second, you guys. She flipped the phone screen down against her thigh. That fast move everyone makes when they want to be done with something, without saying they're done. The screen went dark. She thought she'd ended it, but she'd only rotated the orientation. Of the 3,000 viewers, nearly all clicked off when the picture disappeared. People scrolling on, chasing the next thing, the next polished life to consume. But 14 people stayed on. Maybe their phones were lying face up, and the audio held them. Maybe they were simply slow off the mark. Maybe they forgot to leave. 14 was enough. 14 phones recording the 14 accounts that would later circulate what they heard. Perhaps they were puzzled, assuming a technical glitch. Perhaps they were giving it a moment to come back. Perhaps they'd simply stopped paying attention. The stream was still live, the microphone was still open, still capturing, and Portia didn't check. Just assumed the quick flip had closed everything down. Digital mistakes don't dissolve. Screen down doesn't mean stream off, and 14 strangers were about to hear what Portia believed was entirely private. She pressed the phone against her side screen dark and walked in my direction toward where I stood at the pool's far corner. She didn't glance at the phone again, didn't notice the tiny red recording indicator still burning in the dark against her hip. What she didn't notice was that somewhere across New York, California, Texas, and Florida, 120 people were still connected, still tuned in. Some had already begun recording on their own devices, backing up the stream to places Portia would never find until it was far too late. Everything she was about to say was being captured, every word. She believed she'd ended the broadcast a quick flip of the screen, the casual way you dismiss a call you're done with. But 120 people were still there, still present, still recording. And she was crossing the rooftop toward me with that phone hanging at her side, microphone live, about to say things she was certain would never travel past this terrace. She dragged me toward the far corner of the pool, well away from the gathering, and began speaking in French. Her grip on my arm was hard enough to leave Mark's fingernails pressing through the fabric as she pulled me toward the pool's far edge, the infinity side, where the marble drops into open air. The phone remained in her other hand at her hip screen, dark. Her face held the tight, barely leashed look of someone running out of patience. "Come here," she said low and clipped. "We need to talk away from everyone. Portia, the party." "I don't care about the party right now." We reached the corner 10 feet from the nearest guests. Music drifted softly across the terrace. Laughter floated by. Portia positioned me, with my back to the infinity edge, the mountain view behind me, the 2.4-meter drop to turquoise water just past my heels. She dropped her voice and shifted into rapid, fluid French. "Do you know what Nathan had to do to escape you? To escape your shadow? En no, en board." I stood completely still, let her go. "His entire life he has been ashamed of you. A pool cleaner. That's all you were. That's all you'll ever be to these people." Her French was polished, educated Parisian. "You embarrass him. You embarrass me. You don't belong here." She went on for another 30 seconds. Every sentence was crafted to wound, to reduce, to remind me of exactly where I stood in her world, which was nowhere. I waited until she was done, let the quiet sit between us while the party carried on behind her, completely unaware. Then I looked straight into her eyes and answered in clean, unhurried French with the Marseille cadence that only comes from years of living inside a city, not just visiting it. "I know, I watched him become that." Her expression locked. 4 years in Marseille. I understood every word you said to me this weekend. There's a particular satisfaction in watching someone's face the moment they understand they've been underestimating you for days. And a particular kind of heartbreak when that someone is your son's wife speaking the language of a city where you once built a life. Portia's face drained white, then flooded red. She understood immediately all of it. The lunch with Alec Wentworth. Every dismissive French remark she'd made within earshot, certain I was safely monolingual and oblivious. The humiliation landed like something physical. "You let me," she switched to English, voice unsteady. "All this time, you let me think." "You assumed," I said quietly. "I never told you I didn't understand." "Oh, you manipulative." She couldn't complete it. The shock was shifting right in front of me into something else, something raw, pure, uncontrolled rage. She'd been exposed, outmaneuvered, made a fool of by the unremarkable old man in the embarrassing gray sport coat, the pool maintenance worker who spoke French better than she did. I watched it happen, in real time, the shame curdling into fury, the way it does in people who have never learned to sit inside humiliation. She had spent 3 days performing for an audience that wasn't paying attention. Now, the one person she had written off as invisible had been watching everything. That was intolerable to her in a way reason couldn't touch. Both hands came up and she shoved me hard between the shoulder blades. Violent, sudden, meant to cause harm. I'm 70 years old. I have a bad hip from college football that never healed properly. I was standing 2 feet from the infinity edge, no railing, nothing to catch. I reached for balance and found only air. My right shoulder struck the marble, coping with a crack I felt through my entire skeleton. Then I was going backward into the turquoise water. "I'm falling," she pushed me. "I'm 70 years old, and my daughter-in-law just shoved me into a pool I designed." I hit the water hard, deep. Cold shock, shoulders screaming, water rushing into my nose, my ears, my open mouth. I sank, turned around beneath the surface. The underwater lights made everything blue-green and unreal. My shoulder wouldn't respond correctly. Something was badly wrong with it. Then instinct stepped in. The body wants to survive even while the mind is still working through betrayal. I pushed off the bottom, kicked hard, broke the surface, gasping. Music was still playing. The party was still going. No one had moved toward me. Drowning in a pool you designed yourself is its own particular irony. But drowning while your son watches and walks away is its own particular death. I treaded water shoulder, pulsing with every movement, lungs burning water, streaming down my face. I looked up through the pool lights. Nathan was standing 15 meters away near the bar. VIP investors surrounded him, champagne glasses catching the light. He had seen it happen. I know because our eyes met for exactly 1 second, long enough for me to see recognition in his face. Long enough to see the calculation behind it. My son was making a decision. He could come to help me, could call for the lifeguard, could excuse himself from his partners and walk the 15 meters to the pool edge where his 70-year-old father was struggling to stay afloat with a dislocated shoulder. Or he could protect the deal. I watched him decide. He turned completely around away from me, back to his VIP partners, and started talking again, smiling, gesturing with his champagne glass as though nothing had occurred. As I was saying the RO, eye projections for year 3 are conservative. His voice carried across the water, confident, smooth, uninterrupted. I floated there, shoulders screaming, watching my son walk away. He saw me pushed into a pool and he turned his back, chose investors over his father, chose the deal over basic human decency, chose his career over the man who had raised him alone after his mother left, who had worked night shifts to keep him in good schools, who had built the very ground beneath his feet. A lifeguard appeared at last, a young woman in resort uniform, professional and calm. She helped me to the ladder at the shallow end and asked if I needed medical attention. I said yes, my shoulder was wrong, something broken or torn. Portia had vanished into the crowd. Nathan was still speaking to investors, back turned 15 meters away. I looked up from the water shoulder, screaming lungs burning, and saw my son standing beneath the party lights. He had seen everything. Our eyes had met for exactly 1 second, long enough to see recognition, long enough to watch him make his choice. Then he turned his back and walked toward his investors, leaving me treading water in a pool I had built with my own hands 30 years ago. But Nathan's choice, that unforgivable choice, carried consequences neither of us could have foreseen. They began with 3 seconds of calculation while I struggled in the water. How long does it take a son to choose between his father's life and a business deal? 3 seconds, as it turns out. And that choice tells you everything. Nathan stood frozen while I treaded water 15 meters away, shoulders screaming blood from a head wound mixing with chlorine. The VIP partners were murmuring, pointing concern beginning to form on their polished faces. I watched Nathan's mind work scandal versus control, sympathy versus deal, preservation, father versus future. He made his choice. Holt Draper, the resort's security director, was coming across from the lobby entrance with 2 staff members. Nathan moved to intercept him, with quick, purposeful strides, voice low and controlled. Holt, please get the guests inside, move them to the Sky Lounge. Quickly and smoothly. Mr. Athlon, should I call emergency services for your... No, Nathan cut him off. It's handled. Just move the guests. Then Nathan turned back to the VIP partners with a practiced smile, minimizing managing. I'm so sorry about that. My father, he's fine. Just a little slip. He's always been a bit dramatic. Alec Wentworth looked uncertain, glancing past Nathan toward me in the pool. Nathan, shouldn't someone... He's fine, honestly. Nathan's confidence was smooth, absolute, seamless. Let's give him some space. Can I get you gentlemen another drink? He steered them toward the bar, kept talking RO. Eye projections, market opportunities, timeline for closing. Never looked back at his father. Blood ran warm down my face while I struggled to stay afloat. My right shoulder was useless. Each movement sent a white-hot jolt through my upper body. The terrace music played on. Voices and laughter carried across the water, as if nothing had happened. Nathan stood 20 meters off body, angled completely away from me, sharing some joke with his investors. Then, at the pool's rim, a hand reached down. A resort waiter, young maybe 22, crouched at the edge with his arm extended. Sir, are you hurt? Take my hand. I caught him with my working arm. He braced and hauled, grunting under my weight, until I was up and out, water sheeting off me onto the deck. Thank you, I managed. My shoulder. Don't move it, I've got you. A stranger. 22 years old, name unknown to me, still. He did what my son would not, crossing 20 meters on foot to pull me to safety, while Nathan stood at the bar discussing returns on capital. Resort staff converged, towels, steady hands, low, efficient voices. Not one of them was family. They got me upright, swathed me in thick white cotton, and moved me out of sight. Not through the grand lobby where the VIP guests were working through champagne and canapes. Through a side door into a back corridor, fluorescent-lit industrial underfoot, the hidden circulatory system of the resort, and then into the private medical suite, the room kept ready for situations like this one. White walls, stainless equipment, Dr. Okafor on his feet, expression professionally composed. "Mr. Athlon, I was informed there was an incident. Let me look at that shoulder." I went into the pool. His hands moved quickly, methodically. "Dislocated shoulder, laceration above the left temple. You should be at a hospital. Handle it here." Dr. Okafor held my gaze for a beat. The look of a man who knew when a guest wanted something, kept quiet. He had navigated that territory before. "This is going to hurt. I'll count to 3. He reduced it on 2. I clenched the towel between my teeth, white cotton soaking up the sound that came out of me, something below a scream, but not by much. "A joint is back," Dr. Okafor said. "I still want imaging. That head impact was significant." He irrigated the scalp wound with antiseptic that bit hard, drew it closed with tight, neat sutures, and wrapped both injuries with precise, unhurried hands. I sat on the edge of the treatment table, water still draining from my clothes onto the tile floor, and felt the physical pain begin to crystallize into something sharper, something with edges. The door opened without a knock. Remy Fontenot stepped in, not the resort proprietor, not the executive. Jeans, plain button down. The face of a man who had already decided what mattered. He hadn't stopped to ask questions on the way over. Boyd Stanton had reached him the moment I hit the water. Remy took in the bandages, the soaked clothes, the damage, and said one word. "Gerald." 30 years of history in 2 syllables. "Remy, you didn't need to," Boyd called. Of course I came. He drew a chair to the bedside, sat, and simply waited with me. That's the thing about real friendship. It doesn't arrive with speeches. It arrives and sits down. Friendship reveals itself in who appears. Family reveals itself in who remains. That night taught me those 2 groups can be entirely different people. Silence held for a moment. Dr. Okafor quietly withdrew to give us room. Remy's eyes were carrying something, not sympathy, exactly more like recognition. "I watched the footage," he said, voice low. "Boyd pulled the security feed. Nathan was 15 meters away when you went under. He chose not to move." "Yes, and Portia is the one who put me in. She shoved me." One slow nod from Remy, not surprised, not horrified. The nod of a man whose suspicion had just been confirmed in the worst way possible. We sat looking at each other across that white room, with nothing left to explain. He knew I'd been pushed. He knew Nathan had made his calculation and walked away. He understood exactly what that meant. 30 years earlier, Remy had extended a partnership to me. 20 years ago, my wife Evelyn sat at our kitchen table in Haddonfield with him and said plainly, "If it ever comes to this, if Nathan forces Gerald to choose between shielding himself and shielding Nathan, we cannot be caught unprepared." Audrey Crane drew up the protocols. In 2006 revised them. In 2014 ran a review every 2 years after that. The 4 of us, Remy, Evelyn, Audrey, and I, had kept watch over those documents like a fire extinguisher on a wall, hoping we'd never reach for it, making sure it worked if we did. I straightened slightly against the shoulder pain, met Remy's eyes, 30 years of them, and spoke 3 words. "Activate the protocol." No hesitation, no clarifying questions. "It's done. Consider it moving." "Everything," I said, "every piece Evelyn and I put together. I'm calling Audrey as soon as I leave this room. She's been ready." The throbbing in my shoulder meant nothing alongside what those 3 words had just set in motion. Activate the protocol. 3 words I had kept silent for 15 years, carrying them like a weight I prayed I'd never have to put down this way. 3 words Audrey Crane had been positioned to receive since 2006. 3 words that unlocked everything Evelyn and I had assembled in the quiet years, the financial architecture, the documentation procedures, the measured steps for strategic separation, and sent it all into motion. But Nathan and Portia still had curtain calls to perform. The protocol needed weeks to reach full force. Some of what it triggered, though, landed inside 72 hours. Remy came to my recovery room at 9:47 on a Sunday evening. He had a leather portfolio under his arm, one I recognized on sight, the same one we'd laid across a conference table 23 years ago when we signed the founding papers together. I was in the chair by the window arm in a sling, the head bandage reduced now to something smaller, but still plainly visible. The Palm Springs Luxury Recovery Center had full-height glass on that side, and through it, Mount San Jacinto rose against the night sky, a dark shape cut from darker air. Remy settled the portfolio on the side table and studied the damage to my face and shoulder with quiet deliberateness. How are you holding up? I've had better weeks. I don't doubt it. He pulled a chair close. Word reached me through corporate. Nathan submitted the Palm Springs closing documents on Friday. The way he said it made me straighten. It's what kind of submission? Final signatures, deal timelines, approval requests. A pause. That's the reason I'm here tonight. He drew the portfolio toward him and opened it with the slow care of someone handling something consequential. The contents stopped my breath. Documents I hadn't held in physical form since 1998. The Fontenot Hospitality Originals, Founding Papers, First Generation. He laid them flat between us on the table. The pages had picked up age at the margins, faint yellowing from years in a climate-controlled safe, but the ink was still absolute, clear, dark, permanent. Page 3, 4 signatures, Remy Fontenot, Gérald Athlon, 2 other founding partners, both long since cashed out and retired into quiet lives elsewhere. And mine? My own hand 23 years younger, the signature of a man who believed that staying invisible was the same thing as keeping his family safe. The irony was not subtle. Originals live in my personal safe, Remy said. Everything on file at corporate is redacted. Your name removed per what we agreed in 1998. You needed to stay out of sight. I did. You wanted a wall between Nathan and the money, worried that people who knew your position would find their way to him. That was part of it. I also needed to know who he'd grow into on his own terms. When he turned 30, I nearly told him everything I had the words ready, but he was already ashamed of where I'd come from, by then already measuring the distance between us. I thought I'd wait for him to come to me, to ask about my life rather than flinch from it. Remy said nothing. He already knew the answer. He never asked, I said. I misjudged it. The threat was never going to come from outside. I looked at my own signature on the page, the version of me that still thought silence was a form of protection. Remy leaned forward slightly. The Palm Springs Resort acquisition, $250 million. Under the 1998 operating agreement, any deal at that scale requires unanimous approval from the founding partners. Nathan filed it Friday. He's been telling his CEO this relationship was his, to own 3 years of work, his network, his access. Something moved in my chest. It's legal caught it Saturday, Remy continued. The deal cannot close without your signature. That's the current situation. The room went still. Nathan doesn't know, I said, not a question. No. Remy's voice came out quiet, careful. He's been representing this deal to his CEO as self-made for 3 years. He was trading on a foundation that belongs to you. I turned toward the window. The desert sky was filling with stars one by one. 3 years of cultivation. The promotion Nathan had staked his identity on. The trust he'd built with people above him. All of it ran back through me back to the father he'd watched sink into a pool and left there. What does Nathan believe is happening on his end? I asked. Routine final review. He's assuming Fontenot Legal is doing standard clearance work. The founding partner requirement, he doesn't know it exists, and he certainly has no idea you're the partner in question. The geometry had flipped entirely. 3 days ago, I was the problem Nathan needed to contain the maintenance worker father out of place at his table, an embarrassment in expensive company, a past he'd spent years outrunning. Now, his entire future sat in these 2 hands. The hands Portia had gone after, the hands Nathan had watched her go after without taking a single step toward the pool. Remy sat forward. Gerald, I have to ask, what do you want from me here? I held his gaze and let the silence work. I can sign, he said. What I'm about to share changes everything that came before it, and it will make you question just how long a man can be underestimated before the silence becomes something else entirely. Before we get there, I want to ask you something. If someone close to you had been quietly working against you, would you confront them the moment you found out? Or would you wait and let the truth do the work on its own? As CEO, I have emergency approval authority if a founding partner is unavailable or incapacitated. I can push it through. He let that land for a moment. Or I can kill it, reject the deal outright. Nathan's firm loses the contract. He loses credibility. His position probably goes with it. Another pause. Or I can wait. I can hold this open while you decide whether your son deserves to advance on the foundation you laid. Is this justice or is it cruelty Nathan left me in the water beside a pool I had built? Do I leave him in a boardroom? I didn't answer right away. Remy nodded he understood. There's a timing constraint. Nathan's promotion announcement is set for Wednesday. The deal must close before that his advancement is contingent on the Palm Springs closing. That leaves 48 hours. 48 hours to determine whether your son's career survives. Whether you deploy the power you've kept hidden for 23 years to rescue the man who stood by while his wife assaulted you, or whether you allow him to feel what it's like when the ground beneath him gives way. I'll come back Tuesday night, Remy said, rising. For your signature or your refusal. He rested his hand briefly on my good shoulder. Warm pressure. 30 years of friendship communicated in a single touch. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Then he left, easing the door shut behind him. I sat alone with that leather portfolio open across my knees. The 1998 founding document spread in front of me, my signature still dark and clear on the page. 23 years ago, I put my name on those papers and asked to vanish. Asked to have my name scrubbed from corporate filings. Asked to be invisible so my family couldn't be targeted, couldn't be reshaped by wealth, couldn't drift into the kind of people who measure everything in money. I'd been trying to shelter Nathan from greed. What I'd actually done was build the perfect conditions for him to become someone I no longer recognized. Now, I had 48 hours to answer the question. Do I let my son succeed on the empire I'd built in secret, or do I let him fall in the rubble of what he'd become? I didn't sleep. I waited. And at 10:47 p.m., the decision made itself. The text arrived with a soft chime. Dad, we'll talk when you calm down. Get some rest. 11 words. Not one of them asked whether I could lift my arm. I read it 3 times in the low light of the medical suite. No acknowledgement of what Portia had done. No apology, no visit. Just dismissal dressed up as concern, the language of someone conferring a favor by stepping back. I picked up the tablet the medical center provided for patients, pulled up the resort's guest services portal, found the security request form, requested footage from the lobby camera's checkout area, 10:30 p.m. to midnight. The file reached my email at 11:12 p.m. I watched Nathan and Portia check out at 11:03 p.m. He was dressed for travel, expensive casual, the kind of effortless that costs more than my monthly mortgage. Portia, in designer athleisure phone, in hand the way it always was. They were sharing something with the concierge, all 3 of them smiling. No audio, but I could read Portia's lips when she gestured toward the pool area. Exactly what we needed. Total peace and quiet. Peace and quiet. My son was walking out of the hotel where his wife had shoved me into a pool, and he was smiling about the ambiance. They looked like a couple wrapping up a successful trip. Rested. Satisfied. I watched the clip loop 3 more times. Then I made a call I'd been holding in reserve for 72 hours. Audrey Crane answered on the first ring at 2:14 a.m. She'd been expecting it. Audrey's 62 years old, my estate attorney for 23 years. One of 4 people who knew the full shape of the protocol Evelyn and I had designed, said my name the way you say something you've been carrying a long time. Gerald, it's time. No hesitation, she said. I've been ready since Thursday. Paige has the file server, timestamps the IP logs, everything. The live stream audio is verified and backed up in 3 separate locations. Paige Dunmore, one of Audrey's associates, a specialist in digital evidence preservation. Evelyn had introduced them in 2014, the year we had updated the protocols. Don't move yet, I said. Let them get home first. How long? Let Nathan feel safe. Let him put Arizona behind him and turn his eyes toward the promotion. Remy called me Saturday night, Audrey said. Told me about the Fontenot signature requirement. 48 hours, that's Tuesday night. Yes. Will you sign? I looked out at the desert darkness. Mount San Jacinto had dissolved into shadow, just a mass against the stars now. I'll decide after Nathan thinks it's over. A gun only works when no one sees it coming. There was a pause on Audrey's end, then, you're not the man I thought you were 20 years ago. What did you think I was? A decent man doing his best to protect his family. Turns out you're a decent man who knows when to stop shielding people from themselves. Or I'm just tired of being pushed into pools I designed. Her laugh was quiet, dry. You know what I mean? Evelyn saw this in 2006. She said you had a strategic mind you'd never used because you loved Nathan too much to turn it on him. She was right. Your son inherited that same mind, but he pointed it at his own father. The cruelty isn't impulsive, it's deliberate. That's what makes it worse. Evelyn always saw clearly, I said. She built this protocol because she knew that if Nathan ever put you in a position where protecting yourself meant stopping protecting him, you'd need someone to tell you that was allowed. I'm telling you now. I don't need permission, Audrey. Maybe not, I'm giving it anyway. We talked for another 20 minutes, evidence sequencing logistics timeline. The live stream recording would go to Nathan's CEO first. Preston Galt needed to understand that his star VP had been misrepresenting the Fontenot relationship from the beginning. The iCloud backup from Eli's iPad would follow Eli and Portia discussing Gerald as someone who only matters if he happens to sign something. Then Remy would inform Nathan that the Palm Springs deal required founding partner sign-off. And I would decide whether to provide it. When does a father stop being a father? When his son smiles at the front desk of the hotel where his wife committed an assault? Or when the father chooses to stop absorbing consequences that belong to someone else? One more thing, I said before ending the call. Wait for my signal. They knocked. Now we decide whether the door opens. Audrey understood. I'll be ready. I ended the call at 2:47 a.m. Sat alone in the medical suite, shoulder-pulsing head bandage phone in my palm. Sunrise arrived in its own time desert light, moving across Mount San Jacinto in layers of orange and pink that reminded me why I'd chosen to stay in Arizona 30 years ago. Why I'd said yes when Remy first extended the partnership. Why I'd believed that steady work and quiet integrity would be sufficient instruction for a son who wanted to be a good man. My shoulder still couldn't clear chest height. The medical center wanted me there for another 3 days. Dr. Okafor had flagged concerns about concussion protocols. But my mind was cold and precise. I picked up my phone and sent Audrey a text. Wait for my signal. They knocked. Now we decide if the door opens. Then I said it aloud to the empty room, hearing how it settled in the air. A door is only frightening to the person standing in front of it who cannot get through. I hold the key. 30 years ago, I had tried to hand Nathan everything I'd built. Tried to show him that worth came from the work, not from the money that followed. That who you are in private matters more than how you present in public. He had absorbed the opposite lesson. Learned to be ashamed of where he'd come from, to conceal his father, the way you conceal a flaw, to choose a woman who discussed me in a language she believed was inaccessible to me. And when the foundation became visible, when Portia spotted me in the frame of her precious live stream, when I answered her in the French she thought was her private code, she had shoved me into the pool I'd designed. And Nathan had walked away from the edge. Now they were back in New York. Nathan believing the promotion was sealed. Portia believing the Arizona weekend was something she'd survived and closed. Both of them certain the old man in the medical suite was a problem they had quietly contained. They had no idea the door was already locked from the inside, and I was the only one holding a key. Remy's private plane was on the tarmac at Palm Springs International Airport at 2 p.m. No commercial booking, no paper trail, no record of Gerald Athlon departing Arizona. That was the intent. When you've spent 4 decades building enterprises in hospitality and real estate, you understand that invisibility is a luxury money alone rarely purchases, but the right relationships can. Remy Fontenot, 73 years old, silver-haired, permanently bronzed from his residence in Monaco, had those relationships. He'd arranged everything personally, bypassing even his own executive assistant. As I climbed the stairs into the Gulf Stream, G650 shoulder, still protesting through the painkillers, I understood what he wasn't putting into words. This wasn't simply about getting me back home. It was about making sure Nathan couldn't find me. The cabin was empty apart from Remy and a flight attendant who vanished into the galley the moment I settled into my seat. Remy handed me a glass of Macallan 25, neat the way I'd been drinking it since 1978, and said nothing until we were airborne. Then, Clint will meet you at Teterboro. He has the keys to the Central Park West apartment. I nodded. Clint Oswald, 58 years old, built like someone who'd spent his 20s playing linebacker, close-cropped gray hair, and a face that carried 30 years of managing Fontenot properties across 3 continents. We'd been friends since the Singapore expansion in 1993. He was also one of 3 people who knew about the Central Park West apartment, the one I'd purchased in October 2017 under an LLC that didn't trace back to my name. Nathan had never been there. Nathan didn't know it existed. That was deliberate. He's already there, Remy continued. Audrey will arrive at 7. Good. Then his voice shifted a note I'd heard from him before, usually when he thought I was being too hard on a competitor. That Gerald, are you certain about this? Once Audrey opens that folder, Sabor, I've been certain for 2 years, I said. The Manhattan skyline materialized through the window at 8:47 p.m. Eastern, a solid wall of light set against the winter dark. We touched down at Teterboro at 9:03 p.m., and Clint was on the tarmac beside a black Audi that looked like every other executive sedan in New Jersey. Unremarkable, forgettable, precisely what we needed. He embraced me with care, keeping well clear of my shoulder. Jesus, juror. He pulled back and looked at me. I'm fine, Remy called. Your son pushed you into a pool and walked away. You're not fine. I didn't contest it. Clint had known me too long for that kind of performance. He understood that the wound from the dislocated shoulder was one thing, the other wound, the deeper one, was something Dr. Okafor's sutures couldn't touch. We crossed into Manhattan in silence over the George Washington Bridge at 9:34 p.m. The apartment was on Central Park West in a pre-war building with a doorman who'd been compensated generously enough to have a reliably poor memory for faces. Clint had already stocked the refrigerator, turned the heat on. The place carried the faint scent of cedar candles. I preferred a small thing that caught in my throat more than I expected. Audrey is flying in from Philadelphia, Clint said, setting my bag in the bedroom. She'll be here by 7 o'clock like Remy said. Need anything before I head out? Oh, no, thank you, Clint. He gripped my good shoulder. Whatever you've got planned, I'm with you. After he left, I stood at the window, looking out over the Hudson, and let the quiet settle around me. The apartment was modest. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a small kitchen. I'd used it maybe 6 times in 4 years, but it served its purpose, a place Nathan couldn't locate, couldn't leverage, couldn't turn into a pressure point. I'd bought it the same month Nathan introduced me to Portia. October 2017. I hadn't connected those 2 events until long after. At the time, I'd told myself I needed a New York base that wasn't tied to Fontenot business. Looking back, I think some part of me already understood I would need somewhere to go. Audrey Crane arrived at 7:02 p.m. with a leather portfolio that looked far too thin for something capable of dismantling a man's entire life. She'd taken the last flight up from Philadelphia, still in her courtroom, suit charcoal gray, precisely cut the uniform of someone who bills $950 an hour and is worth it. We'd worked together since 2003 when she'd handled a particularly bruising contract dispute for Fontenot. She was the only attorney I trusted with what came next. Gerald. She set the portfolio on the dining table and looked me over with the same measured assessment that made her formidable in depositions. Shoulder functional? Functional enough. Show me the protocol. She opened the portfolio and removed a document I'd last seen in November 2019. 1 month before the pandemic had fully taken hold, back when Nathan had just gotten engaged to Portia. The Athlon Protocol, 5 steps each one, carefully constructed, legally airtight, designed to systematically dismantle my son's career and marriage while keeping me entirely shielded. When I'd first asked Audrey to draft it, I'd called it a contingency, a thought experiment. She'd looked at me the way she always looked at people who were telling themselves a comfortable story. Step 1, evidence compilation, she began. We have the live stream footage. 120 viewers watched Portia push you. At least 40 accounts screen recorded it. We also have the resort security footage of Nathan during checkout. And Eli's iPad recording, though. We'll need to handle that, carefully given his age. Continue. Step 2, corporate exposure. We notify the Fontenot board that Nathan has been pursuing a deal without disclosing his connection to a founding partner. That's a conflict of interest his firm cannot absorb. Step 3, legal action. Civil suit for elder abuse, endangerment, and emotional distress filed in Arizona where the incident occurred. 4 and 5. Audrey's expression held steady. Public disclosure and financial consequences. We release the evidence and we trigger the termination provisions in Nathan's contract. Preston Galt's company maintains standard clauses covering executives who misrepresent client relationships, commit fraud against the firm, or engage in conduct unbecoming a senior officer. Nathan had managed all 3. I looked at the document for a long time. 2 years ago, working from a suspicion I couldn't fully name, I'd asked Audrey to build this. I'd told myself it was the irrational caution of an aging father, afraid of becoming invisible to his own son. But some part of me had already recognized that Nathan was becoming someone I didn't know, someone who would eventually be forced to choose between his career and his father. 2 years ago, I built the weapon. Tonight, I was deciding whether to use it. I wasn't in Preston Galt's office when the email landed. Audrey sent me the meeting transcript 2 hours afterward, but I know exactly what my son's face looked like when his career caved in at 9:17 a.m. Nathan had walked into Hargrove Peak Capital's executive suite that Tuesday morning, expecting to confirm his promotion announcement scheduled for December 22nd. Preston Galt, 52 years old, CEO of Hargrove Peak Capital, the kind of polished silver-haired presence that photographs well in business profiles, had been Nathan's champion for 3 years. According to Audrey's source, a junior associate assigned to take notes, Nathan settled into his chair at 9:15 a.m., wearing the expression of a man who already knew how the meeting ended. Then Paige Dunmore's email arrived. Paige Dunmore, Vice President of Legal Affairs at Fontenot Hospitality, had worked alongside me since 2002. She was deliberate, diplomatic, and loyal to the founding partners in equal measure. Her email to Preston was all three. Subject line, Palm Springs Development, suspension of negotiations. Preston read it aloud. Fontenot Hospitality suspends all Palm Springs negotiations pending review of internal partnership matters. Duration indefinite. Nathan's response, "That's impossible. I just closed this deal in Arizona. Remy confirmed it." Preston cut in. "You told me the Fontenot relationship was yours. 3 years you'd been developing it. What partnership matters?" The transcript logged 17 seconds of silence. Then Preston read the email again, more slowly, because Paige had tucked the critical line into the footer. "All Palm Springs matters require approval of founding partners, including Mr. Gerald Athlon." Preston read it twice. Nathan said nothing. Then Preston asked the question that ended my son standing in that room. "Gerald Athlon. Your father. The pool maintenance guy is a founding partner of a $2 billion hospitality company." Nathan's recorded response, "That's not he never. I didn't know." "You spent 3 years cultivating your own father's company and didn't know. Or you knew and you didn't tell me." Nathan left Preston's office at 9:34 a.m. without answering. I received Audrey's transcript at 11:23 a.m. I was sitting in the Manhattan apartment Nathan didn't know existed, reading about my son's world coming apart in measured time-stamped detail. What I felt wasn't grief. It was arithmetic. Clean and exact. 3 years of Nathan treating me as irrelevant. 3 days since Portia shoved me into the pool and Nathan turned his back. 72 hours since I made the decision to stop being invisible. Paige's email was step 2 of the Athlon Protocol corporate exposure. It was functioning precisely as Audrey and I had designed it in November 2019. Audrey called at 11:28 a.m. 2 certified letters were delivered to Nathan's penthouse this morning. One from the bank, one from BMW Financial Services. Athlon Holdings LLC has initiated withdrawal of all financial guarantees, effective in 30 days per the notice provisions in the original agreement. The bank has been notified and will begin reassessment of loan terms. The penthouse loan is no longer secured. The car lease terminates in 30 days. I had signed those withdrawal orders at 6:30 a.m. from the Central Park West apartment. Athlon Holdings LLC, the entity I'd established in 2008, had been quietly backing Nathan's penthouse loan since he purchased the property in 2018. He'd never thought to ask where the guarantee originated. He'd assumed it was Portia's family money, or his own creditworthiness, or simply the natural gravity of success pulling in his direction. It had never crossed his mind that his father was the reason a bank approved a $3.2 million loan for a 38-year-old executive with solid income but insufficient collateral. The BMW lease was the same story. I had co-signed the lease in 2019 through the LLC. Nathan drove a $95,000 car and never once wondered how he qualified. Audrey's second source, a doorman Nathan had tipped generously over 3 years, reported that Nathan returned to the penthouse at 11:02 a.m. Portia handed him the certified letters. The doorman had been replacing a hallway light fixture just outside their door when the exchange began. Portia, who was Athlon Holdings LLC. It says here they guaranteed our penthouse loan. Nathan quieter. Athlon. It's Dad. He's been behind it the whole time. Portia louder. Your father guaranteed our penthouse, the one I pushed you to protect. Silence. Does he understand the shape of it yet? That he stood at the pool's edge and watched his wife go after the man who had built everything Nathan called his own. Audrey's final update came in at 11:47 a.m. Nathan was sitting on the penthouse floor, not the couch, not a chair. The floor, both certified letters laid out flat in front of him. Portia stood in the kitchen with her arms folded, waiting for him to explain how their life had just been placed on a countdown clock. The doorman heard Nathan say it aloud. "I thought I was shielding our life when I didn't stop you on those stairs." Then quieter, "None of this is ours. The penthouse, the car, the promotion, it was all him." Portia asked, "What does that mean for us?" Nathan didn't answer. What could he say? That he'd spent 3 years building a career on his own father's network without understanding it. That the penthouse he'd chosen to preserve when Portia shoved me and he turned his back had been guaranteed by the man he walked away from. That every credential he'd used to justify keeping me small had been erected on a foundation I'd quietly built without once asking for acknowledgement. The transcript Audrey assembled ran to 32 pages covering 9:17 a.m. through 11:52 a.m. It held Paige's email, Preston's questions, the certified letters, the doorman's account, and one final detail that made me set down my coffee and hold very still looking out at the Hudson. Nathan had asked Portia whether she thought his father knew whether any of this was coincidence or something else entirely. Portia's answer, "How could he know? He's your father." Audrey called at noon. "Nathan knows about Fontenot, knows about the guarantees. He's on his penthouse floor working out that none of it was ever really his." I asked one question. "Does he know I'm the one who pulled them?" Her answer, "Not yet." Nathan's mother called him on December 22nd with a proposal. She knew a PR consultant who could position me as the villain, and she'd cover the fee herself. Dolores Hendricks, 68 years old. My ex-wife and Nathan's mother had ended our marriage in 1997 because I worked 80-hour weeks while she wanted a husband who came home for dinner. We'd maintained minimal contact for 24 years. Birthday cards, occasional calls, cordial distance. She'd remarried twice, settled in Connecticut, managed an art gallery. I hadn't thought about Dolores in years. She had apparently been thinking about me. Audrey's source reported that Dolores called Nathan on December 22nd at 3:47 p.m. 19 minutes later, she'd agreed to underwrite a media offensive. By December 23rd, Dolores had wired $25,000 to Tessa Marlowe's crisis consulting firm in Philadelphia. Tessa Marlowe, 41 years old, sharp-featured auburn hair in a permanent work bun, ran a boutique practice built around reputation recovery. For executives caught in public difficulty, her method was precise construct. The counter-narrative identified the sympathetic angle, humanized the client while making the accuser read as vindictive. She accepted Dolores's retainer on December 23rd and scheduled an intake call for that afternoon. Audrey had a source inside Tessa's firm who forwarded the transcript. Dolores's pitch: "My ex-husband is using his business connections to dismantle our son's career. We need the media to understand he's the aggressor here." Tessa's first question: what was the original dispute that set off his response? Dolores's answer: a family disagreement in Arizona. Gerald overreacted and turned his money into a weapon. I read it at the Central Park West apartment. Dolores was practiced at half-truths. A family disagreement technically not false. She left out the pool, the dislocated shoulder, the live stream, the founding partnership. In her framing disagreement, overreaction weaponized money. Tessa pressed further. What specifically happened in Arizona? When had Fontenot suspended the deal? Why would a hospitality company become involved in a family matter? Dolores's answers got thin. She wasn't sure of the exact timeline. She didn't fully understand the Fontenot connection. Gerald had always been controlling with money. Tessa flagged it in her notes, client avoiding specifics. Why did Fontenot suspend? What actually happened in Arizona? Dolores left me in 1997 because I worked too hard and earned too little. Now she was spending $25,000 to destroy me for working smart and earning enough. The irony would be almost funny if it weren't so hollow. Audrey called on December 24th. "Tessa Marlowe is running searches on you, Fontenot and Nathan. She's already questioning the gaps in Dolores's account." Good," I said. "Let her keep pulling." "You want her to find the truth." "I want her to discover that Dolores hired her to spin a lie. Once Tessa realizes she's been handed a false narrative, she'll drop the client or demand the actual story. Either way, Dolores's $25,000 just became our opposition research." Audrey was quiet for 3 seconds. "You're enjoying this." "I'm appreciating the efficiency." Tessa spent December 24th and 25th digging. Her searches surfaced Fontenot's founding documents with my name listed as a partner since 1998. She found Paige Dunmore's suspension email to Hargrove Peak Capital. She pulled the Palm Springs Desert Grand Resort incident report from December 17th, elderly guest injured. Medical transport requested. Family declined to press charges. The pieces were all there. Tessa only had to fit them together. Meanwhile, Nathan was assembling something else. On December 27th, he met with a private attorney in Midtown Manhattan. Audrey's network had a source in that office, a paralegal, who forwarded Nathan's intake form. Nathan's stated objective: establish father's mental incapacity to override asset control. Nathan's pitch per the notes. My father is 70 years old. He's making irrational financial decisions, withdrawing guarantees, sabotaging business arrangements that would benefit the family. I believe he's experiencing cognitive decline. The attorney's response: we'll need documented medical evidence of impairment. I work with a psychologist who conducts these assessments. If we can establish incapacity, you can petition for conservatorship. Nathan's question: how soon could we freeze his asset control? As 6 to 8 weeks if the evaluation supports the claim. Nathan paid a $10,000 retainer that afternoon. The psychologist was scheduled to contact me on January 3rd. My son was attempting to have me declared mentally incompetent to hire a professional to construct evidence of cognitive decline file for conservatorship and seize control of what I'd built. It was fraud, it was elder abuse, and it was something I had specifically prepared for. Does Nathan grasp that each fraudulent step he takes is adding material to my legal case? Every fabrication becomes evidence. Every desperate maneuver confirms why the preparations were necessary. Audrey called on December 28th after receiving Nathan's intake form. Nathan filed for a psychological evaluation to establish incapacity. Gerald, this is fraud. I know. What do you want me to do? Send him my November 18th assessment. 3 independent physicians, all confirming full cognitive function. Fontenot required it for partnership certification renewal. Silence. You had this done a month before Palm Springs. Yes. You knew he'd try this. I had completed a comprehensive mental health evaluation on November 18th, 2021, 29 days before Portia pushed me into the pool. 3 independent physicians, a neurologist, a psychiatrist, and a geriatric specialist. Cognitive function tests, memory assessments, decision-making evaluations. Fontenot Hospitality required updated medical certifications for founding partners over 70. The timing was coincidental. The results were unambiguous, fully competent, no cognitive impairment, cleared for all partnership responsibilities. Nathan's incapacity case was finished before the psychologist made a single call. Audrey asked the question I'd been waiting for. Why did you schedule the assessment in November, 3 weeks before Palm Springs? I told her the truth. Nathan has been calling me senile for 2 years, forgetting names, losing track of conversations, outdated thinking. I knew he'd use it eventually. I documented my clarity a month before he tried to prove my confusion. My grandson called me at 11:47 p.m. on December 28th from inside his bedroom closet, crying hard enough that he could barely get my name out. The FaceTime notification lit my phone. Eli's face filled the screen, 8 years old, red-eyed wedged among coats and shoes, the only light coming from the iPad's glow. He was whispering, "Grandpa?" "Eli, what's wrong, buddy?" "Mom told Dad you ruined everything, and we can't see you anymore." His voice cracked. "But Grandpa, I saw her push you. I was watching from the balcony." My heart stopped. Then it started calculating. Eli had witnessed the assault. He'd been on the second-floor balcony overlooking the pool terrace that Sunday in Palm Springs. Portia shoved me down those stairs. Nathan turned his back, and my 8-year-old grandson witnessed every moment. "Why would she do that?" Eli asked. He told his dad, "You're trying to hurt us, but you didn't do anything wrong. She pushed you." I could hear him fighting to keep his voice quiet, holding back so his parents wouldn't catch on. He was tucked in a closet calling his grandfather. Some things once done can't be undone. I said, "I'm okay, buddy. Are you safe?" "Yeah, but Mom and Dad keep fighting. Dad got fired. I think he's home all day now, and he won't say your name anymore." Fired. Preston Gault had moved faster than I'd anticipated. The founding partner revelation had cost Nathan his position at Sterling Gray Capital. "Are you coming back?" Eli whispered. I miss you. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell him I'd make everything right, that we'd go back to the museum the way we did last spring, but I couldn't promise what Nathan had already taken from us. I miss you two more than you'll ever know. Can I keep calling you like this so Mom and Dad don't find out? My grandson was asking permission to maintain a secret relationship with me, hiding in closets to hold on to contact his parents had cut off. You can always call me, I told him, always, day or night. Eli nodded, wiping his eyes. Then I asked the question that turned heartbreak into evidence. Eli, I need you to do something important. Don't delete any photos or videos from your iPad. Can you promise me that? Okay, but why? Because sometimes the truth lives in the places people forget to look. Like, where does your iPad back up to the cloud on its own? I think so. Dad set it up when he gave it to me for my birthday. I didn't yet know what was sitting on that device. I only knew that electronics hold on to what people forget to hide. Audrey would find it later. Right then, I was simply making certain no one erased it first. Nathan had given Eli the iPad in June 2021. If it was configured to back up automatically to iCloud, then every photo, every video, every recorded moment from the past 6 months was stored remotely, potentially, including anything Eli's device had captured on December 17th. Keep it safe, I told him. Don't let anyone reset it or wipe your account. Okay. Okay, Grandpa. We talked for a few more minutes. Then I heard a door open somewhere, Portia's voice calling Eli's name. I have to go, Eli whispered. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, buddy. The screen went dark at 11:54 p.m. Eli had asked whether I was coming back. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to promise I'd fix everything and we'd make it back to the museum. But I couldn't offer what Nathan had already stolen. I sat alone in the dark apartment, trying to separate the grandfather from the strategist. The grandfather wanted to shield Eli. The strategist recognized that Eli had just confirmed he was a witness and that evidence might exist on a device Nathan controlled but hadn't thought to secure. Audrey would advise me to petition for access to Eli's iCloud account, but that would tip off Nathan and Portia, and they'd wipe everything before we could preserve a single file. Better to wait. Let the iPad sit untouched, syncing automatically each night, while Nathan and Portia fought over money and pinned the blame for their unraveling on me. My phone buzzed at 1:14 a.m. Clint Oswald's name came up. A text. You need to see this. The photo loaded slowly. A midtown bar, upscale but understated. 2 men at a corner table. One I didn't know. 40's expensive suit. The other I recognized the instant I saw him. Brody Kavanaugh, 39 years old. Nathan's VP at Sterling Gray Capital, his closest colleague for 4 years. The man Nathan had called his work brother at Thanksgiving 2020. Brody was sitting across from Nathan's direct competitor, leaning in a folder spread open between them. Clint's second text. Brody Kavanaugh, Nathan's VP, meeting with Wentworth Capital's acquisition team. Been there 90 minutes. I type back, can you make out what they're saying? Clint's reply, he's handing over Nathan's entire Palm Springs strategy. They're offering him a senior position if Wentworth wins the deal. Brody wasn't just shopping himself around. He was selling Nathan out. Every contact Nathan had spent years cultivating, every bidding strategy, every financial vulnerability. Brody was laying it all on the table for the competition in exchange for a title and what I put at roughly a $180,000 salary increase. I texted Clint. Document all of it, photos, timestamps, locations. How long have you been on? Brody, 3 days, Clint replied. Audrey's instruction, Brody's met with Wentworth twice already. Tonight made 3. Nathan built his career on a house of cards. My money, my connections, my guarantees. Now his own people were pulling cards from the bottom, while he was still trying to stack more on top. I sat at the dining table at 2 a.m. taking stock of the night's intelligence. Eli traumatized, hiding in closets to reach me, carrying the secret of having watched his mother's assault. Nathan's career in ruins, fired from Sterling Gray. Brody selling him out to rivals. Dolores bankrolling PR attacks. Portia the assault liability captured on a live stream. Audrey assembling evidence files that grew thicker by the day. My son was being dismantled from every side, and he had no idea. I texted Audrey. Brody Kavanaugh just became evidence file 7. Nathan's own team is feeding the fire. Her reply came quickly. I'll fold it into the compilation. Gerald, your son is losing everything from behind. I knew the full picture: Nathan's mother attacking his colleague, betrayal from within his own ranks, his wife's assault on record, his son traumatized, his career gone, his penthouse funded by the father he'd abandoned. And Nathan still didn't know that the person he'd trusted most had just sold him out for 6 figures and a better title. Clint sent 12 photos in total, time-stamped, geotagged faces sharp. Brody Kavanaugh shaking hands with Wentworth Capital's acquisition director. Brody sliding documents across the table. Brody smiling like a man who just secured his own future by handing someone else's to strangers. I didn't need to destroy Nathan. I only had to step aside and let everyone around him do it for me. Tessa Marlowe called Dolores at 9:32 a.m. on December 30th and said 5 words that ended the PR campaign. "I can't run your story." Audrey's source inside Tessa's firm forwarded me the call recording 2 hours later. I listened to it in the Manhattan apartment, watching the December sky go gray beyond the Hudson. Tessa had spent 5 days combing through public records, Delaware corporate filings, Fontenot Hospitality Partnership documents from 1998, and asset valuations. What she found was not the narrative Dolores had paid $25,000 to manufacture. Tessa's research note per the recording: Gerald Athlon, founding partner, Fontenot Hospitality Inc., Delaware, filing 1998. Current asset stake estimated $400 million to $600 million. Not a victim, an architect. Dolores' voice defensive. "What are you saying? I can't run your story. The facts don't support it. Your ex-husband isn't leveraging connections to damage Nathan. Nathan spent 3 years unknowingly working to acquire his own father's company. Gerald Athlon isn't a bitter, broken man. He's a founding partner in a $2 billion hospitality empire." "That's impossible," Dolores said. "Gerald was a pool technician. He had nothing. He worked pool maintenance in the early 90s while he was building the business. The Palm Springs Desert Grand Resort that Nathan was trying to acquire, Gerald designed the infinity pool in 1990. He owns the company. Mrs. Hendricks, you hired me to cast your ex-husband as the aggressor. But the story here isn't revenge. It's about a man who built an empire in silence while his family wrote him off as irrelevant." The call ended at 9:47 a.m. Dolores hung up without asking for her retainer back. I called Audrey. Tessa dropped Dolores' narrative completely. "She's writing a different article about you." Audrey sent me Tessa's draft headline at 11:23 a.m. "The founding partner, his son never knew how Gerald Athlon built Fontenot in silence, while his family dismissed him as just a pool guy." I read it twice. Tessa had found everything: the founding partnership, the Palm Springs connection, Nathan's 3-year pursuit of a deal he never truly understood. The article wasn't a hit piece. It was investigative storytelling, with receipts. Tessa's closing paragraph: Dolores Hendricks hired this reporter to expose her ex-husband's vindictive abuse of power. Instead, the investigation revealed something else entirely: a father who built everything his son claimed to have earned, and a son who never thought to ask where the foundation came from. Publication date: January 1st, 2022. Audrey called at 11:34 a.m. Tessa Marlowe is writing the story. She found the Fontenot partnership, the asset withdrawals, all of it. It publishes January 1st. "Dolores paid her to make me the villain," I said. "Instead, she's writing the truth." "Perfect. This is going national. Tessa's firm syndicates to 6 major outlets. By January 2nd, everyone will know." "Good. Once it's out there, it can't be taken back." I thought about Eli hiding in his closet crying, Nathan on his penthouse floor understanding at last that none of it had ever truly been his, Portia shoving me down those stairs while Nathan turned his back. I was certain. Clint called at 4:03 p.m. "Nathan and Portia just pulled up to the Haddonfield house. I'm here like you asked. Nathan's getting out. Looks like he hasn't slept in 3 days. He's heading to the door." I'd handed Clint the key on December 21st with a single instruction: be there when Nathan came looking. I knew he would come. Desperation makes people easy to read. He's knocking, trying the doorbell. Portia's asking where you are. "What did you tell them? That you'd gone? That you weren't coming back?" Nathan's using his key now. They're going inside. I'd cleared out the Haddonfield house on December 22nd. The furniture stayed: couches, tables, beds. But everything that carried meaning was gone. Photographs, books, my father's watch collection, Eli's drawings from the refrigerator. The house still looked inhabited, but it was hollow, like a stage set standing empty after the last performance. Clint stayed on the line. I could hear him breathing, waiting outside. "Nathan's calling your name," Clint said. Walking through the kitchen, the living room, the dining room. On the dining room table, I'd left one envelope, white unmarked, sealed, containing a single handwritten note on my personal letterhead. Was Nathan standing in that emptied house beginning to grasp it? His father hadn't left him. Nathan had left his father bleeding on a staircase and flown home as if nothing had happened. Clint's voice again. He found the letter, opening it. Portia's reading over his shoulder. I knew every word. I'd written it on December 20th, sitting in the Manhattan apartment, with Audrey's protocol document spread across the table. The letter read, "You left me in a pool in another country. I came home without you. It wasn't me who left. It was you who abandoned me. All financial support from Athlon Holdings LLC has ended. G.A." Clint went quiet for 17 seconds. Then Nathan's reading it aloud. "You left me in a pool. I came home without you. It wasn't me who left. It was you who abandoned me." What's Portia doing asking what it means? What does that mean? You left him in a pool. Nathan's not answering, just standing there, gripping the letter. I waited. Clint stayed on the line, listening to the silence fill a house that used to be mine. Then Clint said, "Nathan just said something to himself. I think he said Palm Springs, the stairs. I left him there. I walked away." The truth spoken aloud at last. Clint called back at 4:47 p.m. Nathan found the letter, read it twice. Portia asked what it meant about the pool. He told her. "I left him there. I walked away when she pushed him, and I just left." "Did she say anything back?" She tried to explain. Said it was an accident, that she never meant to hurt you. Nathan didn't respond. He got in the car and drove away alone. I sat in the Manhattan apartment, watching the winter sun sink behind the river. Tessa's article would publish in 36 hours. Nathan had confessed his abandonment out loud. Dolores's PR campaign had collapsed on itself. Brody's betrayal was fully documented. Eli's testimony was preserved and waiting. The protocol Audrey and I had built 2 years earlier was unfolding exactly as designed. The climax of Chapter 5 had begun. Preston Galt called Nathan at 8:03 a.m. on December 31st with the words, "Every executive fears. We need to meet in my office immediately regarding an ethics matter." Audrey forwarded me the meeting notes from Preston's assistant later that morning. Nathan arrived at Hargrove Peak Capital's executive suite at 8:45 a.m., looking as though 2 weeks had aged him 5 years. Preston didn't offer coffee. He read directly from HR documentation prepared by legal counsel. "Nathan, you're on administrative leave pending an ethics investigation. Documentation indicates you misrepresented your relationship with Fontenot Hospitality as independently cultivated when records establish a familial partnership." Nathan's response, per the notes, "This is my father. He's leveraging his connections to tear down my career over a personal family dispute." Preston cut him off. "The evidence didn't originate with your father, Nathan. It came from Paige Dunmore's legal office and your own email server. You claim to have built a relationship with a company your father founded. For 3 years you presented the Fontenot deal as your own independent achievement while pursuing a contract that required approval from a founding partner who shares your last name. That's either fraud or a failure of basic diligence. Either way, it's a credibility crisis. I didn't know he was a partner. He never told me. That is not a defense, Nathan. It's an admission that you failed to conduct basic due diligence on a $250 million development deal." The meeting lasted 11 minutes. Preston scheduled a formal evidence review for 2 p.m. in the main boardroom. Fontenot's representatives will present their findings. You may bring counsel or a witness. Nathan called Portia at 9:17 a.m. Audrey's source, the same doorman who had been feeding us information for weeks, reported the conversation. "They're running a formal review. Fontenot is sending representatives. I need you there to establish the family context." Portia's response, "I'll make clear, your father is retaliating. We'll show them this is vindictive." Nathan believed he could steer the narrative if he could just frame it as a family matter. He had no idea what was waiting for him at 2 p.m. I walked into that boardroom, with my shoulder still bandaged from where my daughter-in-law had pushed me, and my son had watched. Every step hurt. Every step was worth it. Nathan and Portia arrived at Hargrove Peak Capital at 1:55 p.m. They took the guest chairs at the boardroom table, expecting corporate attorneys, perhaps a Fontenot 5P, reading from prepared remarks. At 2:03 p.m., the door opened. I walked in, wearing a tailored navy suit, left shoulder visibly bandaged beneath the jacket. Remy Fontenot followed, then Audrey Crane carrying 2 leather portfolios, then Paige Dunmore with a laptop and a projection remote. We took our positions at the far end of the conference table. Nathan went pale. Portia froze mid-breath. Preston stood. "Mr. Athlon, thank you for coming. I understand you have documentation regarding the Fontenot partnership and related matters." "I do," I said. "My legal team has prepared a comprehensive presentation." Nathan leaned toward Portia, voice low but audible across the table. "He's actually here. He came. I'd been gone 11 days. Nathan hadn't seen me since December 17th, since Portia shoved me down those stairs and he turned his back. Now, I was standing 10 feet away in a room where his career was about to end, and he looked at me the way a man looks at something he believed he had left behind for good." Paige connected her laptop to the projection screen. The opening slide appeared: Fontenot Hospitality Legal Review, Hargrove Peak Capital Partnership, Misrepresentation. Exhibit A, Paige began. Live stream audio from Palm Springs Desert Grand Resort Rooftop Pool. December 14th, 2:47 p.m. 120 listeners recorded the conversation in real time, including French-language statements made by Mrs. Portia Athlon. The audio played. Portia's voice captured across 120 phones filled the boardroom. French phrases I had understood completely while lying in that medical suite. The English translation then appeared on screen, synchronized with the recording. Portia's face went white. "Exhibit B," Audrey said, advancing the slide. "iCloud backup recording from minor witness device, December 14th, 7:32 p.m. Audio contains statements by Nathan Athlon and Portia Athlon regarding Gerald Athlon's relevance to family interests." Eli's iPad recording played. Nathan's voice: "Dad only matters if he signs something." Portia's reply: "Otherwise, he's just dead weight. We maintain for Eli's sake." Nathan closed his eyes. "Exhibit C," Paige continued. "Security footage from Palm Springs Desert Grand Resort. December the 17th, 10:47 a.m. Check out surveillance showing Nathan Athlon and Portia Athlon departing the property while Gerald Athlon remained under medical treatment for injuries sustained in the pool staircase incident. The footage showed Nathan and Portia laughing at the front desk, loading luggage, pulling away. Timestamp 10:47 a.m. That same morning, I was having my dislocated shoulder x-rayed. Exhibit D. Audrey set a document on the table. Comprehensive mental health assessment, completed by Gerald Athlon on November 18th, 2021, 3 weeks prior to the Palm Springs incident. Perfect cognitive function, certified by 3 independent physicians. Submitted in response to Nathan Athlon's December 27th petition to establish mental incapacity for conservatorship purposes. Preston picked up the assessment and read through the certification. Then he looked at Nathan with an expression I recognized immediately. The look of a CEO who has just realized the person he hired has become a legal liability. Exhibit E, Paige said. Photographic documentation of Brody Kavanaugh, Hargrove Peak, Capital 5P, meeting with Wentworth Capital representatives December 26th through 29th, exchanging confidential Hargrove Peak strategic documents. Clint's photos filled the screen. Brody shaking hands. Brody sliding folders across the table. Brody smiling. Nathan's jaw went tight. He hadn't known about Brody's betrayal. He was finding out now in front of a room full of witnesses. Paige moved to the final slide. The French to English translation of Portia's poolside statements laid out like a legal deposition. Mrs. Athlon, Paige said, her voice perfectly composed. "Would you please read the English translation of your own statements beginning at line 14? Portia looked at Nathan. Nathan stared at the table. Paige waited. Portia read, her voice unsteady. "The old man only matters if he signs something. Otherwise, he's just a liability we maintain for appearances." The room went silent when she finished reading her own words. 43 seconds. I counted. My son couldn't meet my eyes. Preston shut the evidence binder. "Mr. Athlon, is there anything in this documentation you wish to challenge?" Nathan stayed silent. Every argument he'd stockpiled, family vendetta, bad faith retaliation, had been flattened by evidence that was time-stamped, notarized, and legally airtight. He had nothing left to say. 43 seconds of silence proved it. Preston rose from his chair. "Effective immediately, your position at Hargrove Peak Capital is terminated. You'll be escorted out by security." Nathan got to his feet without a word and moved toward the exit. Then he stopped, turned. For the first time since he'd entered that room, he looked directly at me. I watched it register on his face the full weight of what he'd lost, and the fact that I was still standing. I rose from my seat, held his gaze for 11 seconds, and delivered the only line I would speak during the entire proceeding. I didn't punish you for being poor. I'm correcting you for choosing to be cruel. I sat back down. Nathan offered nothing. Portia kept her eyes on the table. Preston stood at the head of the room, watching to see if any response would come. 20 seconds. Nathan's jaw shifted once his mouth started to open, then didn't. No rebuttal materialized. The moral accounting was finished. Preston straightened. Mr. Athlon. Mrs. Athlon, you're free to go. Security will see you out. Nathan and Portia cleared the boardroom at 2:54 p.m. on December the 31st, 2021. I watched them cross the threshold. Nathan's posture had caved in on itself. Portia wouldn't lift her eyes. The door swung shut behind them. Remy, Audrey, and Paige quietly packed the leather portfolios. Preston asked whether I required anything. I told him no. 2 months of preparation protocols, built evidence, assembled a strategic collapse engineered piece by piece. And the sum total of what I said to my son across all of it was 12 words. That was enough. Audrey reached me at 3:42 p.m. While my car was heading back toward the Manhattan apartment. Preston briefed me directly. Nathan's termination for cause was finalized at 3:15 p.m. The board acted during the presentation itself. What were the stated grounds? 3 years of falsified client relationships, misrepresentation of corporate assets, and an attempt to fabricate mental incapacity against a business partner. Preston's verdict to Nathan was blunt. There's nothing to fix. He's done. Did Nathan push back at all? He tried to pin everything on Brody Kavanaugh, claimed Brody's information leak to Wentworth Capital was what killed the deal. Preston informed him that Brody had already been let go that morning. Fontenot flagged the irregularities. Hargrove ran its own inquiry. Every thread had been pulled. Brody Kavanaugh, 4 years at Nathan's side, trusted like a brother, had been cut loose at 9 a.m. that same day. Nathan was directing his anger at a man who no longer worked there, trying to make someone else carry the weight that was entirely his. Preston had known about Brody before Nathan walked through the door. The precision of it bordered on surgical. I had spent 2 months constructing the protocol. Evidence gathered, guarantees pulled, the entire edifice brought down with deliberate care. And still the only words I put to my son directly were 12. I didn't punish you for being poor. I'm correcting you for choosing to be cruel. Tessa Marlowe's piece went live at 6 p.m. on December the 31st. Audrey sent me the link at 6:04 p.m. with 4 words just published. Read it now. I did. I sat at the window of the Manhattan apartment as the winter light drained from the Hudson and read every word. Tessa had taken the assignment Dolores paid $25,000 to commission and turned it inside out. The article that was supposed to bury me had become the article that explained me. Gerald Athlon, the man who built Fontenot Hospitality from the ground up, while the people closest to him treated him like a footnote. Nathan Athlon, the son who spent 3 years chasing a deal he never knew his own father controlled. Tessa's lead paragraph. For 3 years, Nathan Athlon presented himself to colleagues at Hargrove Peak Capital as someone who had personally cultivated an exclusive relationship with Fontenot Hospitality. He had built it, he said, through his own initiative and strategic vision. What he didn't know, what he had never thought to investigate, was that Fontenot's founding partner shared his last name. The piece traced the full architecture. The 1998 partnership, the Palm Springs development, the infinity pool. I had drawn up in 1990 Nathan's 3-year blind pursuit, Paige Dunmore's suspension memo, the guarantees I'd quietly removed the November 18th cognitive assessment, establishing my complete mental fitness 3 weeks before Nathan moved to have me declared incompetent. Tessa's final paragraph. Gerald Athlon, 70, chose never to tell his son about Fontenot. Those who know him say the silence was intentional. He wanted to find out whether Nathan could build something real without the benefit of a father's name he didn't even know was worth anything. The answer arrived in late December 2021. And when Nathan's world came apart, it wasn't his father who brought it down. It was the discovery that the platform beneath him had never been his own construction to begin with. By 7 p.m., the piece had been picked up by 6 syndication partners. By 7:30, Nathan's name was circulating on professional networks, annotated with phrases like nepotism, fraud, and corporate ethics failure. The version of events Dolores had paid to establish a grieved father, attacking a self-made son, had been erased. Something truer had filled the space. Audrey messaged at 7:41 p.m. Dolores just rang Portia. "Do you want the recording?" I called her. "What's on it?" Dolores had gotten through Tessa's article and made a decision. Audrey played it for me. Dolores clipped and certain I've read the piece. "The situation is worse than I understood. You should file for divorce from Nathan before the fallout reaches you personally." Portia frantic. "You were the one who said, 'Stand firm.' You told me Gerald was deploying his money to wreck us. You funded the whole campaign." "Dolores, I misjudged who Gerald is. That's not something I can undo for you. What you can still do is protect yourself. Leave Nathan, say you were deceived, get ahead of this." "Portia, you pushed me toward all of it." "Dolores, I can't carry you both through this. That's not an option anymore. Save yourself." The call cut off at 7:39 p.m. Dolores ended it. She had been the architect behind my daughter-in-law's cruelty, fanning the contempt, writing the checks for the smear campaign, giving Portia cover to do what she did. Now, she stepped back from all of it, as cleanly as setting down a glass. Gone, like she'd never touched any of it. I was at the Manhattan apartment at 8 p.m., New Year's Eve, watching the city outside gather itself toward midnight. Nathan terminated for cause. Brody removed. Tessa's article was running on 6 platforms. Dolores had fled the scene she created. Portia sat in a penthouse that couldn't sustain itself without my financial backing, with assault exposure, and no ally left. The Athlon Protocol, conceived in November 2019, carried out over 14 days in December 2021, had run its course. Audrey phoned at 8:02 p.m. Nathan fired for cause. Brody removed. Tessa's pieces everywhere. 6 outlets, 3 trending platforms. Dolores has disappeared. Portia is on her own. "Gerald, it's finished." I let the silence sit for a moment. Then Audrey asked, "Is it truly over? Or is there something left to do?" I looked out at Manhattan lit up and counting down, full of people welcoming something new, while my son's life sat in rubble. I thought about Eli crouched in his closet, voice hushed, asking whether I'd come back. I thought about the look on Nathan's face in that boardroom at the precise second everything registered. I thought about the note on the Haddonfield dining table. "You left me in a pool. I came home without you." I found I didn't have an answer for Audrey's question. Clint called at 9:32 p.m. Nathan had tracked him back here and located the building. He's coming up now. At 9:47 p.m., my son knocked on my door for the first time in 3 weeks. I looked through the peephole. Nathan in the corridor suit, creased face hollowed out, carrying the look of a man who had aged 5 years in a single afternoon. He knocked a second time. 3 quiet taps. Not a demand. More like a man who wasn't sure he had the right. I stood there for 11 seconds. Then I turned the handle. "Dad, please, I moved aside and let him in without a word. Nathan stepped past me into a place he hadn't known existed, the apartment I'd bought 4 years ago, against precisely the scenario now unfolding. He stopped in the entryway and took it in. The furniture, the Hudson visible through the glass. A whole life assembled in full view that he'd never had any reason to imagine. "I didn't know if you'd even open the door," he said. "Neither did I told him. 19 seconds of nothing. Then I tilted my head toward the living room. Nathan took the couch. I settled into the armchair opposite the one I'd sat in 8 hours ago, working through the last of the evidence files, putting the final pieces of the protocol into place. Nathan went first. "I didn't realize it was you. The LLC, the Fontenot partnership, the guarantees, all of it. Dad, I genuinely didn't know." "I'm aware," I said. "That was intentional." "Then why stay silent for 23 years? I looked at him, sitting there dismissed, exposed, everything stripped down to a foundation he'd never once questioned, and I told him what was true. "Because you never thought to ask. You decided I had nothing, and you were embarrassed by me, before you had a single fact to justify it." Nathan absorbed that like a blow. His mouth moved without producing anything. He lowered his eyes to his hands. 43 seconds of silence. I counted every one. "I needed to find out whether you could build something real," I went on. "Without the advantage of connections you didn't know you'd inherited. Without the Athlon name doing work you thought you were doing on your own." The answer, Nathan, was no. You couldn't. And when you fell short rather than reaching out, you stood by while your wife assaulted me and then walked out the door. I know. Do you actually grasp what it means to watch your son choose a business transaction over your life? Nathan's voice broke. Yes, I understand that now. We sat in that living room for 16 minutes without a word between us. Outside, the city was gearing up for midnight, the countdowns, the fresh starts, the noise of people who believed January 1st could change things. Inside, my son and I were sitting inside 23 years of silence that had never been addressed. I looked at Nathan on that couch, terminated, humiliated, cut loose by every person who had propped him up, and I noticed I didn't feel like I'd won anything. What I felt was tired, worn out from being right about who he'd allowed himself to become. Nathan spoke again at 10:08 p.m. The pool, that rooftop infinity pool in Palm Springs. You designed it. I refined the Infinity Edge design. Contract work for the original resort, 1990. Nathan closed his eyes. The color drained from his face as the full weight of it settled. Jesus, he said just above a whisper, she pushed you into a pool you built, and I left you there. Yes, I told myself I was protecting the deal, he said, our future, shielding Eli from watching his father lose. You were shielding yourself from being seen with me. Nathan didn't push back on that. He dropped his elbows to his knees and put his face in his hands. The apartment held nothing but silence and the faint sound of traffic drifting up from the street below. When the full irony of what I'd designed reached Nathan, that Portia had shoved me into a pool I'd built with my own hands, he buried his face in his palms and didn't lift it for 47 seconds. Sometimes the weight of irony is more than words can carry. When he finally raised his head, his eyes were red. I should have pulled her back. I should have called 911 instead of waiting on hotel staff. I should have stayed in Arizona until the doctors cleared you to fly. I should have. That's not what I'm asking for, Nathan. He stopped, looked at me thrown off. Palm Springs was a symptom, I told him. The push, the desertion, Portia's behavior, those were the results of something that had been growing long before December 17th. If you want to apologize, go back to the cause, not the consequence. Nathan settled against the back of the couch. The silence shifted. It wasn't defensive anymore. He was looking for something, searching for words he'd never let himself say out loud. At 10:18 p.m., he found them. I was ashamed of you. I didn't move. Nathan kept going, voice low, but holding steady. Since I was 12, maybe before. You worked with your hands. You drove an old truck. You showed up to parent-teacher conferences in jeans while the other fathers came in suits and ties. I wanted a father who sat behind a desk, whose business card read director or executive, not consultant. I wanted someone I could talk about without having to explain, someone to brag about, not someone to account for. He looked at me directly for the first time since he'd sat down. I'm sorry for all of it. Not just Palm Springs, not just the stairs or the pool or the moment I walked away. I'm sorry for being ashamed of you while you were building something I was too young and too self-absorbed to see. I'm sorry for writing you off as irrelevant when you were the ground under everything I thought I'd constructed on my own. I'm sorry for 20 years of treating you like you weren't enough. I gave him one nod. That's what I needed to hear. Nathan exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for 2 decades. We sat across from each other in that Manhattan apartment. The place he'd never once known was there. Bought with money from a partnership he'd never known existed in a building that represented everything he'd never thought to ask about. Outside, the city was reaching its count. Inside, my son had finally named the wound that had produced everything else. I looked at Nathan and saw past the man who'd turned his back on me 3 weeks before, past him to the 12-year-old boy who'd started drifting because his father didn't match the picture he wanted to show the world. I saw 20 years of collected shame turning into contempt, then distance, then cruelty. Embarrassment, hardening into abandonment. Nathan sat across from me in that room and said what I'd been waiting 20 years to hear. I was ashamed of you. Not a justification. An acknowledgement. He didn't apologize for Palm Springs. He apologized for 2 decades of dismissing the man who had built the foundation under everything Nathan claimed as his. That was what I needed. Audrey slid the trust documents across her desk on January 1st at 10:03 a.m. and spoke the words that made Nathan's removal permanent. Eli's future is protected. Nathan's access is terminated. I sat in Audrey's office studying the paperwork that restructured my family's financial legacy. 2 trusts, 2 futures, one for my grandson, one for my son. Only one came with guarantees. Eli's education and living trust, Audrey began. $2 million fully independent. I hold the trustee role until Eli turns 25. Nathan and Portia have no access, no control, and no grounds to contest. It's airtight. And Nathan, the Athlon Legacy Trust, has been restructured. He is no longer in the direct line of inheritance. Assets are managed by an independent board, not through family succession. Distribution is tied to merit and demonstrated need evaluated quarterly. If Nathan rebuilds himself and shows financial responsibility, he may petition for support. But automatic access is gone, permanently. My grandson would receive $2 million at 25. My son would receive what he could justify, assessed by people who didn't love him enough to shield him from his own choices. My grandson gets a future, I said. My son earns what he gets. That's the right arrangement. Audrey watched me sign both documents. When the pen went down, she locked them in her safe and returned to her seat. Is this what you were after? Nathan cut off financially, but Eli protected. I looked past Audrey to the credenza against the wall. A silver frame photograph sat there, my late wife Evelyn, taken in 2017 at Fontenot's Monaco property. Audrey had kept the photo after Evelyn passed in 2018. It's what was right, I said. Not what I wanted. What was right. Evelyn would have drawn it up the same way Audrey said, quietly. She always said, protect the children, correct the adults. I signed the papers that gave Eli $2 million and Nathan nothing guaranteed. My grandson gets a future. My son earns what he gets. That isn't cruelty. That's consequences with a safety net built for the one person who deserved one. Portia signed divorce papers on January 2nd at 2:17 p.m. At 3:08 p.m., a courier arrived at her apartment with a certified envelope. Inside, the complete French-to-English translation of Portia's Palm Springs rooftop statements, formatted like a legal deposition. Audrey's cover letter was clipped to the front. For your records, so you don't forget what was said and what was heard. The 120 livestream listeners caught it in French. You can read it in English now. Audrey's source reported that Portia sat at her dining table for 43 minutes without moving. Then she folded the document, put it in her handbag, and left the apartment. No tears, no calls. She simply walked out. I picture Portia sitting alone with her own words in English. The old man only matters if he signs something. Otherwise, he's just a liability we maintain for appearances. No audience of 120 strangers this time. Just her and a record that wasn't going anywhere. Audrey texted at 4:02 p.m., translation delivered, receipt confirmed. I replied, good. Clint came to the Manhattan apartment on January 3rd at 11 a.m. He brought coffee from the place on Amsterdam Avenue that Evelyn had always loved. We sat in the kitchen with the morning light coming through the windows. You heading back to Palm Springs? Clint asked. Next week, Remy wants to close the development deal face-to-face. I need to finish that chapter properly. How do you mean finish it? How? By walking through the front entrance this time, instead of the maintenance door. Clint smiled. When we were young, you always came in through the service entrance at the resorts. Said it was quicker. It was, but I'm using the front door this time. For 30 years, the maintenance entrance. Faster, efficient, and visible. This time, I'd walk through the front. Not because I had something to prove, because I finally had the standing to do it. Clint looked at Evelyn's photograph on my kitchen counter, the same one Audrey kept in her office. She'd be proud of you, Clint said. Evelyn, the way you handled all of this. I looked at the picture of my wife, Evelyn Athlon, 66, in that photo silver-streaked dark hair, carrying the kind of quiet intelligence that made people underestimate her until it was far too late. She died in October 2018, 3 years before Portia pushed me into that pool. But she had seen what Nathan was becoming long before I was willing to admit it. I told Clint the truth. She designed most of this, the protocols, the trusts, the strategic withdrawal. 2 years ago in this kitchen, when she knew she was dying, she sat across from me and said, Nathan's been pulling away from you since he was 12. One day he's going to force you to choose between protecting yourself and protecting him. When that day comes, choose yourself. Clint set down his coffee. Evelyn said that in November 2019, 2 months before Audrey and I drafted the Athlon protocol, she didn't live to see Nathan's betrayal, but she had mapped it. The trust, the restructuring, the evidence strategy, the financial severance with protections built in for Eli. That was her design. I'm simply the one carrying it out. So, when I signed those papers the day before, I was honoring the final strategic guidance my wife left behind. She always said, Eli gets $2 million and a clean start. Nathan gets what he earns and the chance to demonstrate he's capable of more than he's shown. Clint looked at Evelyn's photograph for a long moment. Then he lifted his coffee cup toward her. I raised mine. We sat in that kitchen, Clint and I, thinking about what Evelyn had set in motion before she died. She'd recognized that Nathan was capable of cruelty long before I could bring myself to accept it. She'd built the framework for protecting myself while keeping Eli safe. And she'd given me both permission and instruction to choose my own dignity over my son's comfort. The Athlon Protocol wasn't my revenge. It was Evelyn's legacy executed with the same precision she'd always applied to everything that mattered. I was just the one who signed the documents and walked through the doors she'd already unlocked. The following week, I went back to Palm Springs. I'd walk through the front entrance of the resort, where my daughter-in-law had shoved me and my son had turned away. I'd execute the deal Remy had been holding, and I'd stand in that space as the founding partner who'd finally earned the right to use the front door. Evelyn would have done the same. I stood before the main entrance of the Palm Springs Desert Grand Resort on January 5th, 32 years after I first came through the employee gate in a blue uniform with a toolbox in my hand. Remy Fontenot stood beside me in the January sun, looking at those glass doors as though we were about to enter a cathedral. He understood what this moment was. The last time I'd been here, Portia had pushed me into the rooftop pool, and Nathan had walked away. This time, I was stepping through the front door as a founding partner. Ready to go in, Remy asked. I spent 30 years coming through the service entrance, I said. It was quicker that way, but today I have time. I pushed the door open. The lobby air carried the scent of desert sage. Marble floors I had once mopped caught the January light and held it. The woman at the front desk looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Athlon," she said. "Welcome back." "Not sir, not excuse me, Mr. Athlon." She knew my name. She knew I belonged there. Remy and I crossed the lobby toward the elevators. I didn't glance at the maintenance corridor tucked behind the concierge desk. Today I was moving through the same spaces the guests moved through, visible, recognized. The elevator doors closed. Remy pressed the rooftop button. "I'll meet you in the boardroom," I said. "Give me 10 minutes. Remy nodded. The elevator opened onto the rooftop terrace, deserted at 10:15 a.m. No guests, no music, no celebration, just the desert sky and the infinity pool stretching out toward the mountains. I walked to the edge, the exact spot where Portia had pushed me 3 weeks before. The water was still turquoise and perfect. I set my hand on the marble lip and felt the grain I knew from memory. I had refined this infinity edge in 1990, reworking the spillway so the water appeared to dissolve into the horizon. Every vein in that stone was familiar to me. My shoulder still ached from the fall. "I refined this infinity edge in 1990, I said aloud to the empty terrace. Made the water look like it touched the sky. She pushed me into my own design. 3 weeks ago, I was bleeding here. Nathan checked out with Portia, laughing at the front desk. Today I was standing at this pool about to sign the deal Nathan had spent 3 years chasing without ever knowing he needed my approval. Full circle, I said. I placed my hand on the infinity edge and felt the stone I'd worked with my own hands. 32 years ago, I installed it. 3 weeks ago, she pushed me into it. Today I would sign the deal that folds it into my legacy forever. Everything comes full circle if you're willing to wait. I rode the elevator down to the conference level. Remy was already in the boardroom with Paige Dunmore and 2 Fontenot legal advisors. The contract rested on the mahogany table, 147 pages, setting out the Palm Springs Desert Grand Resort development expansion. Investment, $250 million. Unanimous founding partner approval required. I sat down. Remy slid the signature page across to me. "This is the deal Nathan spent 3 years trying to close," Remy said quietly without realizing the whole time that he needed your signature. "He was knocking on the door of his own house," I said. "Now I'm opening it, but he's not coming through yet." I read the signature line, Gerald Athlon, founding partner, Fontenot Hospitality. Before I picked up the pen, my phone vibrated. A text from Nathan. "I know you're signing the Palm Springs deal today. I'm sorry, I'm your son." I set the phone face down, picked up the pen, and signed, Gerald Athlon, founding partner. The deal Nathan had built his career around closed with the signature of the father he'd written off as irrelevant. Remy shook my hand. "Congratulations. Development begins in March. Thank you for waiting." I left the boardroom at 11:18 a.m. and walked out to the resort's back terrace overlooking the open desert. The sun was high, the air dry and warm. I looked out at the landscape where I'd put in 3 decades of invisible work, My phone rang. "Nathan," I answered. I flew across the country to be left bleeding beside a pool I had once built. I came home on my own. Then I came back not to the pool, but to what the pool had always been part of. Everything I had quietly assembled while my family decided I had nothing. "Dad?" Nathan's voice was careful, quiet. "I'm your son. That has to mean something." I looked out at the desert, the mountains rising against the sky in the distance. "I know," I said. "I raised you. But the man you become, I don't recognize him yet. What do I do?" The question hung in the air between us. Nathan was asking his father how to undo what he'd broken. But I couldn't do that work for him. "Rebuild," I said. "On your own this time, without my money, without my connections, without my safety net beneath you. Show me who you become when everything has to be earned. Give me time to see if the man you build is someone I know. How long? I don't know. That depends entirely on you." Nathan went quiet for 19 seconds. "Then I understand. Eli's trust is protected. He'll have $2 million at 25. You won't, but you'll have the opportunity to prove you can construct something real on your own foundation instead of mine. Is that forgiveness? No. It's time, and it's conditional. You walked away while Portia pushed me. You spent 20 years being ashamed of me while standing on everything I built. Now you rebuild. I'll be watching. And when I see someone I recognize, if I see someone I recognize, we'll talk about what comes next." I could hear Nathan breathing. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay." We hung up at 11:26 a.m. I stood on that terrace looking out at the desert, at the resort I'd helped construct, at the landscape that held 32 years of work no one had thought to credit. I had walked through the front door. I had signed the deal. I had told my son plainly what came next. The door between us wasn't locked, but Nathan would have to prove he deserved the key. I made my way back through the resort lobby past the front desk, where the attendant gave a respectful nod, out through the main entrance I had finally earned the right to use. Remy was waiting beside the car. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." And that was where it ended and where it began again. Gerald standing at the front door of a resort he had built from nothing, watching his son find his own way back from the ground up. This road cost more than most people will ever know. It cost years of being overlooked, a shoulder injury that still ached, and the particular grief of watching your own child become someone you no longer recognized. But I believe God places certain seasons of silence in our lives not to punish us, but to prepare us, so that when the moment finally arrives, we are ready to walk through the door with everything we need already in hand. The most powerful moves in life are often the ones no one sees coming. If these father stories have stayed with you, here is what I hope you carry forward. Never confuse a man's silence for ignorance. The quietest people in the room are often the ones who have already done the work. If you are building something real, protect it carefully. What you create in patience cannot be taken by those who only know impatience. When someone shows you who they are, believe them early, but leave room for who they might still become. And if you ever find yourself treated as irrelevant by the very people you love, remember this story of a dad's revenge that was never really about revenge at all. It was about dignity. It was about a man who chose to let the truth speak louder than any argument ever could. If this moved you, leave a comment below and tell me what stayed with you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you haven't already subscribed to His Hidden Revenge, there are more stories here that deserve to be told. Thank you for spending this time with me. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.